The winner is An American in Paris, Metro-Goldwyn.
You heard the tumultuous shouts go up from the audience. Popular decision again, American in Paris, the best motion picture of the year.
Oh dear. Welcome to Picture This, 1951. We have made it back to the 50s. I am welcomed, co-hosted, joined by, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm in a new location for this episode, so it's going to be a little bit of a training wheels, getting used to riding the bike again. But welcome, Chad. Picture This. How's it going?
It's going great. We're going back in time again. Not like we didn't do a lot of that last year, but now we get to go back again. We got a lot of earlier years to cover. So I'm happy to be jumping around quite a bit. But yeah, this was definitely an interesting year, an interesting slate. I'm still not sure of what my ranking of this one's gonna be.
Ooh,
so I'm interested.
Decision.
I think I know what my number one is, but I have to kind of figure out where everyone's at about thoughts to try and figure out where everything should go.
Interesting. You said everyone, meaning there are definitely more than just two of us here. So why don't we bring one more in? We're literally going on coast to coast to coast because Chad's East Coast. This next guest is West Coast. I'm North in Canada right now. So we're really spreading it wide today. But joining us as a guest, I believe this is her second appearance, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, correct?
Yeah.
Wings? Yes, she's nodding. Okay, good. Our second appearance having her on this show. It is a streetcar named Karly. Karly, how's it going? Welcome. I'm going to put you up there just so people can see your nickname there. How's it going?
It's going good. I'm glad to be back on Picture This, and with a weird connection between my first time guesting to now.
Yes, you guys will notice out there's a trend that the last time she was on, a Vincente Minnelli musical won Best Picture, and this time that also happened. There was also a Tennessee Williams adaptation. This time that happened. So maybe we'll find a few more little nooks and crannies to compare and contrast. But otherwise, a really great slate we got for you. I will list the films real quick, and then we'll ask how you all generally thought about this slate. But the films are An American in Paris, Decision Before Dawn, A Place in the Sun, Quo Vadis, and a Streetcar Named Desire. If I pronounce that fourth one wrong, I don't speak Latin. I don't think anyone does nowadays. It's just an old text, but we're going to try our best. But the year 1951, obviously the year of the upset. I'll throw up that graphic one more time because right there, smack dab in the middle next to Crash, is American in Paris. Often regarded as one of the biggest upsets of all time in Oscars history, which is kind of wild, just looking back because, it's always interesting to see what was the front runner, and sometimes those front runners aren't necessarily as well ingrained in like the pop culture because they didn't win, and sometimes they are because they didn't win. They become like almost reappreciated and reappraised in a way. But going to be very interesting to talk about this slate. Karly, in general, what did you think of this slate in totality? What do you think of this?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty strong slate, especially the three that were like the front runners for Best Picture. I thought those were all really strong, and like the other two, I didn't mind either. But I thought it was a pretty strong slate. There was some that I thought I might not like that I really liked, and some that I didn't like quite as much as I thought I might. So,
perfect. Chad, what do you think of this slate in general?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same thing as like, I feel like there's only like two that I had heard of that I thought I had always like been meaning to see, and I'm glad I finally got around to. And then the other three I didn't really know much about and found very interesting. So yeah, I think overall just I liked it. I don't know if it's like one of the best slates or anything, but I do think there's some bangers in there.
Absolutely. And it's a very versatile slate as well, I would say. We have a lot of different types of movies. You got a musical, you got a Roman epic, biblical epic, you've got a Tennessee Williams play, you've got like a kind of a sizzling hot kind of romance thriller in a way, and then you got a war film. So it's really just kind of like covering all the bases in different genres and different types and all that. But it was an upset nonetheless. So we will talk a little bit more about what the actual upset was, what was upset, what were people thinking at the time. But before we do, we have to set the stage for the time itself and kind of take you guys back to 1951. a year that none of us were alive for. None of our guests will ever have. We're probably alive for it, but there were people back then that were making history. So, Chad, tell us, what was the history like of 1951?
Absolutely. I don't have a lot here, but I do have a few things. 1951 is in the middle of the Korean War, so a little bit after the World War II ended. The 22nd Amendment is ratified to limit U.S. presidents to 2 terms. Hopefully, this will stand by 2028. We'll see.
God.
Rodgers and Hammerstein's The King and I opens on Broadway. The 17-point agreement for the peaceful liberation of Tibet was signed. The wood roller coaster Vuoristorata opens in Finland and is still open. The Volkswagen Type 1, aka the Volkswagen Beetle, is produced. My wife owned one of those at one point.
Very cool.
I Love Lucy airs its first episode. The U.S. officially ends its war with Germany, and IBM is formed.
Very cool. Some very interesting history. Yeah, it's like after the World War, so like, you know, we're still in the crux of like movies that kind of are capturing World War II, kind of post-war, are still trickling out. We get one of those in this one, but we're a little bit past that war, kind of headed into the 50s, which is an interesting decade before things really started to get a little darker in the Academy's standards and stuff. We're still kind of in the golden age of Hollywood as well, film speaking, so it'll be very interesting to look at that when we're talking about these movies, especially one in particular, which was just such like a defining cultural whatever at the time. But Chad, tell us about some births, maybe some deaths of the time, and then some albums.
Oh yeah, we got some. We have Robin Williams, which might be a kind of important figure for Dylan there for reasons. Luther Vandross, Olivia Hussey, another person we discussed on here. Mark Hamill. We've also discussed him on here. Phil Collins, Jill Biden, Sting, Kurt Russell, Michael Keaton, Dale Earnhardt, Jackie Jackson, Bonnie Tyler, Sally Ride, Mark Harmon, Tommy Hilfiger, Kirstie Alley, John Mellencamp, Angelica Houston, Ace Frehley, Deborah Jo Rupp, Ben Carson, Stellan Skarsgård, Janine Pirro. I don't know, I'm naming all the conservatives. Tony Danza, Lou Ferrigno, and Phyllis Smith from The Office. And then you have just a few deaths that I know. I don't know a lot of people from, back in the day. William Randolph Hearst, Fanny Bryce, W.K. Kellogg, and John Flynn.
Very interesting. All right. And some albums. Tell us about them.
Oh yeah, I don't have any of these, so I don't have show and tell this time. But Genius of Modern Music by Thelonious Monk, Masterpieces by Ellington by Duke Ellington and his orchestra. I know that sounded like it was just called Masterpieces, but it wasn't. Hank Williams Sings by Hank Williams with his Drifting Cowboys. Afro-Cuban Jazz Suite by Machito. Ritual of the Savage by Les Baxter. On Moonlight Bay by Doris Day. Les Paul's New Sound Volume 2 by Les Paul and Mary Ford. Satchmo at Symphony Hall by Louis Armstrong. Lover Man by Billie Holiday, and Sonatas and Interludes for Prepared Piano by John Cage by Mauro Adjemian.
Cool. Great. I don't know how many of those I've listened to, but Karly, any thoughts on that? Any Births, Deaths albums? Any of that spark anything? Cool. All right. Let's move on now to some of the films of 1951. We always like to shed a spotlight on some movies that didn't necessarily get as much love with the Academy. So Karly, you're our guest. Do you have any to mention? Any worth noting?
Yeah, there's only one that I've seen. Alice in Wonderland, of course. Delightful film. And there's others that I've heard of. I've heard of The African Queen. I've heard of Strangers on a Train. And when I was looking on Letterboxd, I think this is a short rather than a full film. But Rabbit Fire, which is the Looney Tunes, Daffy and Bugs, where they're fighting about duck season and wabbit season. but I thought that was delightful. I didn't realize it was that old, but yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Chad, any honorable mentions or other 1951 films for you?
Yeah, I don't know if I failed in my research or if there just wasn't many I could see, but there's only a few notable films. Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, Alice in Wonderland, as mentioned, The Day the Earth Stood Still, On Moonlight Bay, and then my best picture worthy, I have two. I have one I haven't seen, but it's Billy Wilder, Ace in the Hole. So I'm like, Billy Wilder's never not been like a best picture mention for us. So
Right.
there you go. And then Strangers on a Train I have seen and I love. So
Right. Yeah, it's very interesting because like a lot of people consider this year a year with like a lot of big snubs. I haven't seen a lot of them, but like Ace in the Hole, like you mentioned, The African Queen is another one that was like super huge at the time. Humphrey Bogart wins Best Actor for it, but ultimately doesn't get nominated. Death of a Salesman, one of the best adaptations that year. There's also some like really good international films that year. Kon-Tiki is a Norwegian film, I believe, that was very popular. And then Rashomon, which was not released internationally in 51. It was a 1950 film, but it qualified for Oscars in 51 just because of distribution. So Rashomon,
I actually have seen Rashomon, and I think that was incredible.
Yeah, so actually this kind of segues us into the actual Oscars history because Rashomon actually became the first ever, I believe, international feature film winner because they didn't have a category for it. And then 1951, they made a special category to award Rashomon. And then I believe afterwards they were like, if we have a year with like a lot of notable international films, we'll nominate them and award them. So this was kind of like a trendsetter in that way, which was really cool. As I said, Humphrey Bogart wins Best Actor for The African Queen. This was his first win for Best Actor. He didn't win for Casablanca. And another thing to note is that he was actually the last man born in the 19th century to win Best Actor. So that was really cool. So the last person born in the 19th century to ever win Best Actor. And then he beat Marlon Brando, of course, who was his second role. Marlon Brando's second role, we'll talk about it. But the other three wins for Streetcar Named Desire marked the first time ever that a film won 3 out of 4 acting awards. It was nominated for all the 4 big ones: actor, actress, supporting actor, supporting actress. It would be replicated, I believe, twice more. Network is another film that did that, and then Everything Everywhere All at Once did that. Won Best Actor, Actress, and then a supporting award. No film has ever won all 4, so we've yet to see that.
Yet.
Streetcar was Streetcar was the closest. If they had put, if they'd given Ned Beatty the win for Network, maybe, but otherwise, this is the closest. This and Network were the closest we'll ever see to 4 acting wins in separate categories, but never say never, as Karly said. So that's very cool. The African Queen was a big snub. People were surprised it didn't make it, as I just said. But American Paris, the win, let's talk about it, because this is obviously the one we are talking about, the upsets. And this is not one that there were no betting odds, so I can't pull up the exact numbers of who was in first, second, third, most likely to get nominated. And even looking at the charts, I mean, it's hard to tell because there were no PGA or Critics' Choice Awards. And the BAFTA only nominated Streetcar in Paris, but Golden Globes went for A Place in the Sun and American in Paris, but American in Paris was in its own category. It was the only comedy or musical that they nominated, so it has a little bit of an asterisk. So really, A Place in the Sun was the front runner based on the Globes, but then Streetcar was nominated for everything else, and American in Paris won the Globes. So it was kind of like a 3-horse race. But a lot of people, because Place in the Sun was predicted to win director and screenplay, and Streetcar Named Desire was going to get all those acting wins, everyone thought, at least in the show, as the show was airing, by the end of the night, it's got to be one of those two, because Streetcar had won 3 acting awards, Place in the Sun had director and screenplay. They're like, all right, so it's going to be one of those two. And then all of a sudden, American Paris wins with not a single acting nomination. I believe it was the first time since Grand Hotel that a film won Best Picture without a single acting nomination. We would obviously see it happen again, I think, future years, but very, very unprecedented for a film to win Best Picture without a single acting nomination, let alone win. So American in Paris kind of defied stats, and a lot of people think that it's because Streetcar and Place in the Sun were similarly a little darker and they split votes. So American in Paris was the more popular, we'll go for something happy, and that's how it kind of came up as the third place to first place because of vote splitting or whatnot. But yeah, this is considered one of the biggest upsets. We heard it when I played the clip. The guy said, "Oh dear," right before he read it, just because it was such, I don't know if it was disappointment or just surprise, but he was like, "Oh dear," wow, okay. Just because Place in the Sun and Streetcar had been winning pretty much everything. I mean, American in Paris collected obviously a bunch of design awards, but it's also because that was when color and black and white were split. So of course American in Paris was going to take a lot of the color awards. So in terms of above the line, American in Paris didn't really get much above the line compared to the other two. So it was just a really, really stunning kind of vote split victory. We'll never truly know if the vote split was the reason or if they just really liked American in Paris more than other voting bodies. We'll see. But we are going to be the judge of whether or not that is a rightful Best Picture winner or not. But I just want to ask Karly, Chad, any thoughts on the upset in terms of like, hearing that those two films got all the acting awards, the directing and screenplay, yet this little musical, MGM musical, came up out of the ashes and ended up snagging the big victory. Any thoughts, without obviously going into our thoughts on the films themselves, but any thoughts on the upset, Karly? Anything?
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting because I don't think we have a modern equivalent to this, at least that I can think of. Like, it's just so interesting that everyone's like, oh, it's that movie or that movie. And then just the third one kind of sneaks in and steals all the votes. I think that's really cool. I think it's definitely an interesting upset. But we'll talk more about the actual movies. But I think it's interesting. Unless you can think of one that I can't think of a modern equivalent. Maybe because we have more awards now, it's easier for us to predict because there's more stats to go off of. But
Right.
I think it's a pretty unique upset.
Yeah. Chad, any thoughts on the upset itself?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it maybe kind of feels like a reverse La La Land, where it's like the musical sneaks in and goes, "Nope, me," kind of a deal. But I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the Academy loves musicals and stuff, but like Karly was saying, I mean, it's just kind of wild that because. I don't know what it would be the equivalent of last year, Wicked just winning randomly, just oh, okay, we all thought it was going to be a Nora or Conclave, and
right.
Wicked just won randomly. Okay,
yeah.
All right.
Yes. But we'll talk in a second whether or not this is on the caliber of Wicked or if Wicked is on the caliber of this. We will find out. But it's hard to think of a recent example. Usually if it's not the winner, it's the one that was second most predicted. So it's just very interesting that there were two front runners duking it out, and then it's the third film that gets it. And obviously there were people who probably weren't surprised because it won the Globe, but it's also it was in its own field. It was a musical comedy. It wasn't up against anything else. And also it's also the first color film since Gone with the Wind to win. So it's also one of those things where these big Technicolor Marvels don't really win just because they're used to giving these black and white dramas the award. So this was like Chad said, they love giving musicals, but this was the start of that. This was what set the trend for them loving musicals. So it's also very cool in that sense because we see a lot of musicals end up winning Best Picture, and a lot of musicals get nominated for Best Picture, and I feel like American in Paris was a big trendsetter. Obviously, we had some before, like Wizard of Oz, but it is really the trendsetter that said hey, this is the hot thing, in a similar way that maybe the indie movie was in the 2000s, or we'll start to see another trend kind of take over in the 2020s that we may not have seen yet. Maybe streaming is that trend. I don't know, even though Netflix has not had any luck, but it's going to be very interesting to see what trends we see in the future that we can predict with stuff like Nomadland or Coda or Green Book or any of those.
I was about to say, Coda would probably be, people would be Coda's kind of ahead of its time then. It
Right.
started the streaming thing.
Right. Or it'll be this anomaly, this one-off, whoa, I can't believe this won. Just if this was the only musical to ever win, but then this decade alone, we'd see, My Fair Lady, and then next decade we'd see Sound of Music and all these, Oliver, all these movies win. So just very fascinating. But we will talk about our thoughts on the movies, because then I think we can better elaborate on what we actually think of them and whether we thought this was a worthy upset, whether or not we really think it's much of an actual attitude upset at all. Obviously it's an upset statistically, but do we feel upset about it? It's the whole thing with Crash and Brokeback that we were talking with Stacey. It's we are upset, but Stacey was it's not really an upset because I saw it coming, but it is statistically an upset, so we'll help define it here as part of the upset. But let us start with the movie itself. Well, why not just burst the gate wide open, start alphabetically with An American in Paris. Chad, tell us about the first of two Vincente Minnelli musicals to win Best Picture that Karly is a guest on the episode for. Go ahead.
Here we go. An American in Paris, directed by Vincente Minnelli, written by Alan J. Lerner, cinematography by Alfred Gilks and John Alton, music by George Gershwin, Ira Gershwin, Johnny Green, not Johnny Greenwood, Johnny Green, and Saul Chaplin, starring Gene Kelly, Leslie Caron, Oscar Levant, George Gruteri. You'd think I'd practice these, by the way, but I don't. Nina Fox,
This is why you practice.
Hoke, and Eugene Borden. Synopsis. Even though he can dance and sing incredibly well, an American in Paris tries to succeed as an artist and falls in love with a French lady betrothed to another man.
Yeah, it's really funny because you set yourself up of like, you really think I would practice, then the next word was like Nina Fock. So
Right.
I don't know. I just thought that was very funny.
Is it Fock?
Right? What the fuck? All right. Well, Karly, you are the guest, and on the last episode we covered Gigi. So we're going back in time a little bit. This is before Gigi, but what are your thoughts on An American in Paris?
It's funny because when I picked this year, I did not know that there was a movie directed by this guy. Because like I remember like putting it on and like looking at the wiki just to see like, oh, who directed it, and just seeing his name and it almost me being like, I recognize that name. Why do I know it? And it just being like a jump scare almost, be like, oh God, this is the Gigi guy. So like just yeah. I started off just knowing that, and it was wild. I was just like, wow. All I knew about this was that some people theorize this might be why Singing in the Rain didn't win the next year. And it's part of why it's been on my watch list for so long. So finally getting to see it was definitely interesting. I did like this one. Partially, I mean, just it's so colorful. It's so gorgeous. Like, I mean, this guy, writing aside, like decisions aside, he knows how to shoot a beautifully colorful film. Like just the ending where it's just like dancing for so much is just, I love that. I love so much of the visuals. But this also has some of the creepy stuff that you see in Gigi a little bit, like just like him relentlessly pursuing this girl. And I was confused at first because at first I thought he knew Lise was his friend's girlfriend because I was confused by that conversation they had at the beginning. But it took me a while to realize, oh, he doesn't know. He's not just pursuing this girl that his friend told he was like really into.
Right.
But like he's bothering her at work. He's asking her out. I'm like, leave Leslie Caron alone. Like, just keep harassing this girl. And like and then Lise, she's not a very good person either. Like she has a boyfriend and she's kind of flirting with this other guy and not being super clear about it. And I did like this. I liked this film. But there's just some stuff in it that I was just like not the biggest fan of. Again, like Gigi, beautiful to look at. I love the dancing. It's fantastic. But it definitely has the things about it that drag it down a bit.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, I think if we had seen this before Gigi, maybe we'd be more critical of some things, or we would just be like, like, I'm not sure. But, like, now that we've seen Gigi, we've seen, like, kind of the extreme of that. It's almost a little more comforting to kind of see this, which is, like, pushing it, but not quite that level. But also, because we know what to expect, we're not necessarily as surprised by it either. And just, like, covering other Gene Kelly musicals, because, like, Chad and I covered Anchors Away, last year, which also has a similar vibe in terms of like, you know, Gene Kelly's trying to flirt with this girl, but she's married to this guy and this guy and this, like, it's like almost like that inner web of relationships, but no one else knows about any of the relationships, but we, the audience, do. So it's kind of this like kind of hijinks, comedic, like dramatic irony, I guess. But you know, that just must be like the thing at the time. It's like, you know, musicals have big song and dance numbers, and like the narratives are what comes second. And I think that's kind of what I'm starting to realize with these musicals is like the plot is not the focus of them. And it's why I needed to watch this again, because the first time I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, this feels familiar to this and that and this and that, and this is problematic and this is that. But I'm like so swept up in the visuals that I'm like, you know what, I'll give it another watch, kind of just acknowledging that this is kind of how musicals were at this era. Not everything is going to be your Sondheim or Rodgers and Hammerstein or Schwartz musicals, you know? So it was one of those things where I just kind of had to like take a breath, kind of reevaluate. So I actually watched this twice for it. So I think I definitely appreciated it more kind of knowing all that. But you do bring up a lot of good points. I definitely agree. Chad, what did you think of this as a first watch for you?
Yeah, I mean, I shared some of the similar views as you got. I mean, I don't think it's nearly as problematic as Gigi is. There's no song
Not
about
a lot
singing
is.
about
Omar.
how great little girls are and stuff.
Yeah.
We don't got any of that in this.
Mhm.
I do what you said when you said that like the story comes second. I feel like that is what I got from it a lot of the times, where it's like, the older woman trying to help out his art career, his painting career, and then I'm like, that doesn't really go really anywhere. And then there's the love story, which is like the other big thing, and then other than that, it's mostly just song and dance. And Karly was poking a little bit at like, is it romantic and kind of a deal. And I think you could see it from either lens. I think especially like back in that day in the 50s, him going to her work could be seen as like, oh, he's taking an interest in her. He's trying to ask her to go steady and, court her and stuff like that. And it's seen kind of as that. From like today's lens, it might be more kind of like, hey, leave her alone. You put your feelers out there. Oh, that actually sounds weird. You put your interest out there. If she really wants to, if you didn't get the hint by her trying to give you a fake phone number, then if she wants to see you, she'll come to you. But I was kind of like, engrossed, I guess, or like kind of not swept away, but like more taken by the romance, I think, part of it. But I just really feel like, like you were saying, Dylan, it kind of takes a back seat to a lot of the song and dance. And however, I like the song and dance more in this than I did like Anchors Away. Where I thought that huge, like, was it like 30 minutes? I think I clocked it at like 27 minutes or something long, just, where it's just dancing and singing.
Yeah, like a dream ballet in a way. Yeah.
Dream ballet. And it feels like they're trying to like kind of tell a story with that or just like show them coming together or, something like that. And it's brilliant. It's gorgeous. It's, just brilliantly staged and just like you don't get like bored watching. Oh, I'm hearing an echo.
Sorry, I was finagling with my mic settings. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Getting used to a new laptop. Sorry, continue.
No worries. But I will say that you don't get bored, or at least I didn't get bored watching that entire sequence. It's kind of like the same thing with Singing in the Rain, where they just kind of stop. And he's like, let me think about how that one thing would go or whatever. And then and then they take another like 10, 15 minutes to do a sequence.
Yeah.
However, whereas with this one, it feels like it's not as connected to the story. And Singing in the Rain, I think that has just as much like story and just, interesting characters and stuff than the song and dance. So I think that's where something like Singing in the Rain should have been nominated and won Best Picture rather than An American in Paris, despite I think An American in Paris still being, I don't know, maybe worthy of a nomination, but I think I liked it overall, just in general. But I don't know.
That's actually so fascinating though that you say that like Singing in the Rain, like the dream ballet almost feels more connected to the story, and it is in a way of like, this is my new pitch of this musical number. And it's right in the fact that like the dream ballet has a story in and of itself, even though I don't necessarily know if it's connected to the actual Singing in the Rain story. Whereas this one though, I felt like the ballet actually did connect to the story, because it was, right after she had finally left him to go to the car with the other man, that's when the dream ballet comes. So it's kind of almost more emotionally brought out, as opposed to like, and I can't believe I'm saying this because it's my favorite movie of all time, but like Singing in the Rain, where it's not contrived, but it's very much like, all right, we're gonna have this big show-stopping musical number. How do we get it in there? Oh, he can just say like, oh, what about this one idea for a movie? Perfect, it works. Whereas this one, it actually felt like Gene Kelly was like daydreaming because of this love for this person and this woman. Now, obviously, the relationship, if you're not as invested in them, you're maybe not as invested in this emotional motive or whatever. But like, I actually felt like it actually justified itself more as this like pausing of events to go dance for 20 minutes in this film, because it was kind of this like it stemmed from an emotion of feeling this loneliness without her, because it starts with him kind of single by himself, lonely, dancing around, then like more things add on and join, and then by the end it's this burst of love, and then of course it takes you back, and then he's she's running back to him in real life, which I actually think is part of a reason why I think this movie disappointed me in the end, only because I actually really like the La La Land thing of like, this is what could have been, this is the dream, but this is reality. And in this one, it was like, this is the dream, and like, guess what? She's coming back for you anyway. Like, you're gonna have her in the end, happily ever after. But that's obviously the 1950s version of that thing, and that's why La La Land, Damien Chazelle took so much from this movie, because he liked that idea of this dream ballet kind of coming from a place of being down and like kind of fantasizing what your life could have been, but then keeping it there and still making it a fantasy. Whereas here it's a fantasy that then becomes a reality at the end when she comes running back into his arms. So I almost kind of felt like this was trying to have like the best of both worlds. It was like this beautiful dream ballet because he's finally left alone, and maybe by the end it'll be this like melancholic kind of bittersweet thing. But then no, they have to give it the happy ending anyway of her running back to him. But I did actually really like how the dream ballet at least stemmed from something that was like more emotionally inside Gene Kelly. It was very interesting, because I know a lot of people do harp on the Singing in the Rain thing, and I always love it, and I justify it. I think it's perfectly justified in the story. It's just, I like how this one was really trying to connect to the themes, because honestly, I wasn't invested in the relationship until they finally kind of brought it out through the dance, and then I was like, you know what, maybe I do feel for it. Maybe I do understand this character's objectives and motives and ambitions, so it's just very interesting, and I love that we can like kind of compare the two, because as Karly said, like, back-to-back years, it's worth comparing. Gene Kelly, musical, Technicolor, best films of all time. This one won Best Picture. That one is quite literally the best picture ever made. So it's just really cool to see, the comparisons. But Chad, I see the thoughts turning in your head, so I'll let you talk. Sorry, I was just on my Singing in the Rain soapbox, which I'm gonna get on later too when we talk about the upset and the snubbery the next year. But go ahead.
No, totally. Yeah, I mean, I think both like are justified. Because I mean, Singing in the Rain, you got like, this is showing what, like color, like not non-silent film can do, kind of a deal, and that's the whole theme of that. But you're right, like that, it's like kind of like an expression of his love or their love, with the whole thing, even if it might go on a little bit too long. I do think, like you're right, like that we haven't gotten to the 70s yet, so we're not really at the melancholic, like, realistic ending yet. We're still at the Hollywood ending stage, I feel like, in the 50s a lot of the times. And so we might actually talk about some like downer endings in this slate, actually. So I don't know why I'm saying that. But American in Paris, because I feel like the relationship she was in was kind of like not a happy relationship. Like, he was trying to uproot her and drag her somewhere she didn't want to go, I think. And then also the fact that she kind of just felt allegiance to him, and she was almost felt like that guy's ward almost, rather than, an actual like wife, like equal wife, as equal as a wife could be in the 50s, I guess. And so yeah, I kind of see it as more of a happy thing, although I do agree that I don't know how realistic it is of just a guy to stop the car like, no, you know what, go with him. Yeah, I don't think that's happening. So
yeah. Also, because I didn't hate the other guy too, because he has his little moments, and I think that's another problem with the movie, is that it's all about Gene Kelly, and I do think he's the least interesting of the three, just personality wise. He's just the more like even keel kind of Joe Schmo, in a good way. I mean, he's Gene Kelly, he's always going to be great, but it's also like I'm just more interested in these other supporting characters. I almost wonder if like, what if Gene Kelly was kind of the more straight laced, like the other guy, but he always has to be the guy. So it's always like, oh, but these super interesting personalities are left on the side. But it's understandable. It's Gene Kelly. I'm not going to complain about it.
I kind of wonder how different this movie would be if they threw away the whole artistic painting thing and he just wanted to be a dancer in Paris, and he was like, trying to become real big in Paris, and then that last thing, instead of being a dream thing, could have been like just a street performance, and like everyone realizes just how good he is or something. Just imagine like that being like a better kind of thing. But then I also wanted to ask you guys how you felt about like the friend who ends up putting on a concert and he's playing all the roles.
Karly?
I'm trying to. I don't remember that part that well. Like, I must have not been paying that much attention. So obviously, I wasn't a big fan.
Yeah, I mean the friends are just so colorful, and I think this is why. I mean, I told Karly before this that I had actually seen the musical first, because there was a stage adaptation, obviously, of it. This is one of the rare ones where like the movie came out first, and then they made the musical years and years later. It was like 2009 or whatever it came out on Broadway, but. yeah, it really does utilize those supporting characters more. Like, it almost feels like a three-hander. It doesn't feel like Gene Kelly's story necessarily. It feels like all three of theirs, which then kind of also makes it feel a little bit more like Anchors Away or On the Town, a little bit more redundant in that way. But it does at least give us a few more options to explore. Because ultimately, yeah, the story is pretty thin. I mean, it is very much like this kind of, contrived narrative around what they want to showcase with the dancing and the musical numbers that I almost wish they had kind of really made it feel like, you're painting this mosaic of Paris through all these different characters and not just this one single love story we've seen time and time again. And the musical numbers are enough to, make it feel different and unique at times and fresh and, have flair and stuff. But, it would have been nice to get maybe just a few other scenes with these other characters that weren't just song and dance numbers to just kind of flesh it out a little bit more and make it feel like a full ensemble piece. Like you're trying to like paint this picture of this place and this, a part of the world and this time and culture and all that. So
yeah, like I said, it took me till like halfway through the movie before I realized there were three guys. So that just tells you like how thin that is. That I was, because I'm very bad with faces, so sometimes it takes me a bit to figure out like which character is which.
And they work so well together too. Like I love when they're like wonderful, it's marvelous. Like when they're all together, like I like that camaraderie, and that's why I love On the Town so much. I've been in that show 2 times because I just love that camaraderie feel of like these three guys. They each have their own objectives, but they're all there together. And like I don't know, I like an ensemble effort in this sense where it is really more about the singing, dancing, and the atmosphere. Make it more of an ensemble piece. It's why we love the Altman stuff so much. Like when we talked about Nashville and Gosford Park, it's like it's not really about the story as much as it is just kind of painting a picture. And this is quite literally about an artist, so you have the ability to like open up that fourth wall and do that. And I just wish they had done that a little bit more successfully. I think Gigi has a more like coherent story, even though it's more problematic. At least knows its beginning, middle, and end of what it wants to try to do.
Yeah, I think you're touching on too about how brilliant like Robert Altman was at handling something like that. Right. Even though I'm not like in love with like Gosford Park and Nashville that much, if you want to tell a story that way, he was like an expert at doing that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that when Karly was talking about like, kind of being like not knowing faces, I'm like that way a lot of the times with certain things in movies. Like it's why I need to watch a lot of things 2 times because I'm always like sitting there like, wait, I talk to my wife and I'm like, who is he in relation to him? And then she's like, that's his brother. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like halfway through the movie, like, okay, all right, now I realize what's going on.
Yeah, I like to joke. I'm like, all white boys look the same because they typically have similar haircuts, and I'm just like bring more diversity just so I know who is who.
I'm on the top right now, and Dylan is down there. So just in case you were wondering, my name's also right there. So
thank you, very helpful.
I do want to just end on the Singing in the Rain of it all because we kind of teased it. But like I feel like the reason why I have taken so long to check this film out and why like ultimately I do still feel like this bitter like against it is because like I really do wonder if Singing in the Rain comes out in 1951 and this comes out in 1952 or if this doesn't even win, if Streetcar or Place in the Sun does win. Like, I really do think There's a World Singing in the Rain gets nominated at least. And probably, I mean, if it's nominated, it wins. But it's the thing is, like, I really think they were like, well, I mean, we can't do the same thing again. It's why a lot of sequels have trouble. And this isn't even a sequel, but it is one of those unfortunate circumstances where I'm like, oh, they finally embraced this big, like, colorful musical. But also because this was such a controversial win, because a lot of people were disappointed in it, maybe they were like, well, we're not going to let that happen again. And, of course, the very next year, the greatest musical of all time comes out. So it's like one of those things where it's just like, it's just so frustrating. And I know you both love Singing in the Rain, but, like, what do you think of that? Yeah. Like, do you think, like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, if these had been released the same year, there's no way Singing in the Rain doesn't take it. Like, it's vastly the superior musical. Like, I can't see a reality in which it would not be the winner. So it's just disappointing because it's like really, this is what, like, maybe if it was like a solid musical that was really great, maybe I could be like, okay, I kind of see it. But it's just like the plot is just so much more thin than Singing in the Rain. Like, just and the romance is not nearly as good as Sing. It's just so hard because it's the thing, like, it wins. It's always going to be compared to Singing in the Rain just because it won, and like a lot of people view it as the reason Singing in the Rain wasn't even nominated. But it's just, it's just one of those Oscars things that just sucks, especially like looking back, being like, oh, come on. You guys didn't know.
Do you think Singing in the Rain has success if this doesn't win, or do you think just the fact that this came out when it did and was nominated that completely tanked it, or do you think it's only because it won? Or maybe they just didn't like it.
Did this win other awards?
Yeah, I mean, like it won some text, as I said, like colorful ones, like cinematography color, art direction color, costume color, score. But like again, like it's all like these more technical things. It won story and screenplay, but that's kind of its own category compared to actual screenplay. That was just like the idea, I guess. Like I guess instead of original and adapted, they had like screenplay was an adaptation, and then story and screenplay was like if you made it original as well. I don't really know the difference.
Okay.
So yeah, it didn't win a lot of above the line. It wasn't even Gene Kelly wasn't even nominated for either of them.
It's just weird because it's like, a few years before Anchors Away was nominated, didn't win, and then they give the win to An American in Paris, and then you don't even nominate the film that's like 10 times as good as those other two movies. And it's like, it's almost like seeing, because I think Anchors Away is worse than An American in Paris. And so it's almost like seeing Gene Kelly getting better and better and better, and then you don't even nominate the one that's the best and maybe one of the greatest films ever made. And then you see like it firing on all cylinders, like every song slaps, and even like the side characters are stars and just a fantastic and amazing. And it's just like, I think it has to be what you said, Dylan, like just kind of like we did that, been there, done that kind of a deal, because it just doesn't make any sense otherwise. Because I mean, even Greatest Show on Earth, isn't that supposed to be like a really bad movie?
Yeah. Unless
so,
you're Steven Spielberg, yeah, it's generally regarded as a bad movie.
So it just doesn't. 1952 is a conundrum. Let's just say that.
Yeah. And honestly,
we're to get to it.
I was gonna say we're gonna get to it actually pretty soon. And the thing with that is that's not even like a proper upset. Like I don't even know if Greatest Show on Earth was like predicted to win or not. But I kind of put my foot down and was like, you know what? No, we're gonna count it as an upset because Singing in the Rain wasn't even nominated.
There you go.
So we're kind of pigeonholing that in there, because it is. It's like one of the greatest. Yeah. Like if you just look at the history of like the biggest films of all time, like Citizen Kane at least gets nominated. Right. It's at least number 2. Casablanca, it wins. Godfather, it wins. And then like what are the other big ones? I mean, you think of like Singing in the Rain, Lawrence of Arabia, like a lot of those win or at least get nominated. Like Singing in the Rain is one of the rare ones in like every top 10, Sight and Sound and AFI, that just like, unless you're like an international film, obviously, because that just never happened.
I wonder if it might have won it anyway. Like if it had actually been nominated, like we'll never know for sure. Like for all we know, if it had actually gotten a nomination, the Academy probably might have gotten behind it.
The only thing I can think of recently where it was like, wow, they actually did that back to back was when Iñárritu, Birdman won, and then the very next year he won for Revenant, but the Revenant didn't even win. And I think a lot of people at the time were like, well, they're not going to give it to an Iñárritu film 2 years in a row, and that's why Spotlight won. So maybe that's just a thing where they're like, we're just not doing it twice in a row, but it at least got nominated. And like that's why I always worry about sequels, because I'm like, you either have your Furiosas that get nothing, or you have your Dune 2s that get a lot of things, or you have your Avatar 2s that win some things, So it's like I really don't know with sequels, and this isn't even a sequel. That's the thing. It's just another musical with Gene Kelly, and that one's actually more directly involved with the Hollywood film system too, which is also weird because I feel like that's always something Hollywood like pats themselves on the back for.
It's funny because I've never thought about the sequel thing in regards to Oscars like until now. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, that is true. Like they don't like to repeat themselves, I guess, which I kind of get, but also seems silly to not vote for the best film of the year if it's the best film of the year.
Like The Godfather and Lord of the Rings are like the ones to kind of,
True. And even then, Lord of the Rings, only the third one won, and Godfather, they at least had a year in between. But even then, like, it's very rare we see it, and it's just a shame. But
yeah, maybe that's why they don't like to award movies when they know a sequel's coming up, because they're like, well, what if the sequel's better and we can only award one, I guess.
But then if it's not better, then they're screwed, So like if they were waiting for Dune Messiah sucks. Like I'm sorry, you missed your shot with Dune 2, and then Denis gets nothing. So it's sad. But any other thoughts on American in Paris?
I did want to ask though, because I know you saw the musical version of this. Was it any different plot wise, or was it pretty much the same?
You know what? It's been so long since I've seen the show. I just remember the show being such a visual spectacle, which it is, but also like I just remember it moving so fast and having so much good energy and all the characters were so colorful and amazing. And that was the one thing I felt was lacking with this one was that I felt like the supporting characters almost felt insignificant at times. Like Singing in the Rain, even like Cosmo feels like such a presence, in that movie. He's like essentially a co-lead. So it was one of those things where I just was, wishing. The musical is much better, I think, than the movie. But I do think, it maybe fixed some things. But I can't think of it enough in recent memory to, like, compare and contrast directly. But I remember really liking it. And because it also did really, dazzle on stage with the dance numbers and stuff. Like real ballerinas and all that. So, yeah. Cool. Anything else on American in Paris? I almost said Singing in the Rain.
I've made a decision that I'm done talking about An American in Paris.
Okay, well, we will move right along to a different decision in just a sec, but I will just one more time say American in Paris, nominated for 8 Oscars, wins 6 of them, wins Best Picture, Best Story and Screenplay, which is one category, Story and Screenplay, Best Scoring of a musical, there's also scoring of a drama, Art Direction, Color, Cinematography, Color, Costume Design, Color, and then it's nominated for Director for Vincente Minnelli and Best Film Editing. So Chad kind of like pre-segued the segue, which I love. We must make some tough decisions here with our rankings, but will the tough decision come from where to rank Decision Before Dawn? Let us find out. Chad, tell us about Decision Before Dawn.
Sure. Decision Before Dawn, directed by Anatoly Litvak, written by Peter Viertel, cinematography by Franz Planer, music by Franz Waxman, starring Oscar Werner, Richard Basehart, Hans Christian Bleck, Gary Merrill, Hildegard Neff, Wilfred Seyferth, Dominique Blanchard, O.E. Haas, and Helene Thimmig. Synopsis. German prisoners of war are recruited to spy for the American army, including a soldier with the nickname Happy, who faces conflicting attitudes towards the war.
Yeah, very interesting seeing what Happy was up to before Iron Man. All right, Chad, tell us, what do you think of Decision Before Dawn? We covered a lot of war films on this channel, and a lot of post-war films as well, and films post-war, talking about war, so we've hit it all. But where does Decision Before Dawn, tell us your decision on how you fall with this film.
Sure. I found this one pretty interesting, because I don't feel like you get a lot, or at least I haven't seen a lot of movies where it covers the prisoner of war thing and how, not just prisoner of war, but how people like, not just like American military, but like other countries' militaries will go in and kind of like use, citizens of that country to help them, like, whether it's like translators or, other kinds of things like that, to do. And then, those individuals end up becoming kind of targets after that because, they're trading on their own country, but to help, a cause that they think is right. And that gets very controversial, of course, because, war is like a two-side thing mostly, unless it's a world war or something like that, which I guess this one would have been. But when it is, everyone versus like one thing, the Germans, or mostly, not really, but mostly. This talks about how America used like prisoners of war to help go and spy on their own country, to support or be against, the efforts of Germany. Also, the fact that, Germany, it was clear, I think, at that point to a lot of people, maybe not everyone, but a lot of people, that Germany was about to lose the war. So it felt maybe about more low stakes, and they just needed that little bit of push to help win the war. And so I like how it, put us in the shoes of the prisoners of war who had to go back to their country and face a lot of people they either knew or just like, felt like home and like comfort and stuff, but you're there trying to help the other side. because of atrocities and all that stuff. And it just felt like a really interesting thriller. And I love the messaging towards the end there that you got about just the messaging of like doing the right thing, even if it is hard, and kind of like the idea of like self-sacrifice and stuff. I mean, I have a lot of different thoughts about just war and like anti-war and stuff like that, but obviously this isn't an anti-war movie. But when you're facing a crisis of crimes against humanity, like in World War II, there's really no like anti-war about it. Like you got to stop that stuff. So yeah, I found it really interesting. I liked the vibes of it. Trying to think about anything else that I love, but I'm sure it'll come up after you guys.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because like I'm with you. Like we're very anti-war, and like we love films that like kind of condemn war in the show. We were fans of Best Years of Our Lives was my favorite year of that film of that year, which covered similar things. And we've talked about like Saving Private Ryan and other films that just Thin Red Line. And it's really interesting because I actually did find this to be a little bit more of that anti-war message. It's not as overt, obviously. It's not like trying to like show you the terrors and horrors of war and like you're shook by it and you never want to do it or whatever. Like kind of like All Quiet on the Western Front, for example, the original, not the new one. But I do think like this film, I think it approaches the anti-war sentiment in a different way, which I really liked, in actually giving you someone who should be of a loyalty, but is able to kind of go against what he is supposed to do in order to do the right thing, if that makes sense. It's hard to say supposed to, even though like what you should be doing is the right thing, but it's your country, it's your war, it's your you fight with your people, and like which I think is just so topical nowadays, even if we're not talking about war specifically, but this idea of like, you're an American, you should support everyone at the higher ranks of your country, but at the same time, like, you have to have the people within that country to like speak out if they think something is wrong, and it's why revolutions happen, and yes, that is a war in and of itself, which obviously not a great war, but revolution's better than just mindless war, I would say. But I found this was interesting, in kind of approaching a different way of like looking at anti-war through the lens of someone who is kind of going against his country, but in doing so standing up for what's right. And I just think that was a really cool angle, because normally we don't see that. Normally we see things from either one side or the other, and it very clearly blurs those lines, which I think is really fascinating about this one. But I'll let Karly talk, because I know Chad and I can go on and on. But Karly, what did you think of Decision Before Dawn?
I liked the ideas of this film more than the actual film. Like it took me a while to just get through the movie.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that was the pacing or... I mean, so war films are probably my least favorite genre, subgenre, whatever you want to call it. Just because they just don't really interest me much. Although I did really love the ideas of it, and there were certain parts of this I was really into, and other parts just felt very slow for me. But like I said, I do like the ideas. I like the moral quandary, and I did read it as at least anti-war in a way, which I thought was interesting, because when I saw there was a war film on the slate and it was the 50s, I figured it wouldn't be anti-war at all, just because the time period was, like I feel like that's slightly more recent development, like having a lot of anti-war films just because of, our country and where it was in the 50s. But yeah, I like the messaging, and I thought the ideas were really interesting. The way it developed, I just wasn't interested. The first half I liked a lot more than the second half, where they were out doing their missions and all that.
Right.
And one thing that I really liked, we saw of Monique's character. Like, I was like, there's this woman that's like helping with war stuff. Like, I thought that was so interesting, especially in the 50s. It's like, that is very progressive and feels like very ahead of its time, having a
absolutely
that's. Yeah, it surprised me. I was like, wow. I was shocked that they had a character that was that progressive and that cool. So the little we saw of her, I was excited whenever we got to hear from her and like to see her doing her thing. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and there's something that like war films sometimes, even the anti-war films, struggle with, which is like we're not going to make it too glamorous, but it's a film, so we're going to make explosions and battle sequences, and that's where like sometimes Saving Private Ryan and the new All Quiet on the Western Front sometimes detract me at times, is because it's like, yeah, you're making this anti-war film, but at the same time you have these big bloody battle scenes that people are gonna go hell yeah during, and that's not what you want during a film. You don't want the hell yeahs, as well designed as they may be. Like, you don't want that in a war film. It's when we talk about Hacksaw Ridge, save some time in your schedule, because I will be ranting for a while. But it's like one of those things where it's like, the more glamorous a war film, the more it kind of defeats the purpose. And I like how this film doesn't try to put you in the center of battle a lot. It's a lot of just discussions with people. It's a lot of like trying to like talk to your enemies and talk to your friends who you're really spying on, and like just trying to get to the crux of humanity in a way that is not normal from a war film or an anti-war film. I feel like so many just want to get right to the battle, right to the war itself. But I think a lot of the important stuff to note is that there is so much other stuff happening on the outskirts. That is where the substance really lies with a lot of these anti-war message pictures, which I think is really cool. I thought that was why that second act worked a lot for me. But also, like, I agree, the first half is super strong, because it's also a really engaging premise. It's a really interesting premise. It's like something you don't really see a lot of in film, especially because you also don't want to accidentally try to make it seem like it's a Nazi sympathizer film either. The fact that this German guy, working with the Americans, but they make a really good firm stance as to why that is not true. This is not just making us like a Nazi. It's someone who has never wanted to be involved with that, and is lending a hand to help what he believes is the right thing. So, Chad.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you just said. I think this is a lot of great points you guys have talked about. Like, specifically Karly made just like an interesting point where I was sitting there thinking, like, we do kind of think about, like, as time progresses, so do like ideas, and so like thoughts about anti-war. Like, we're super progressive right now, so we see like a lot of anti-war stuff, but like you think about it going all the way back to the 50s or even earlier, and you're like, no, they're probably like more propaganda, like, yeah, war kind of a deal. But then you go back to, like Dylan was talking about, 1930, All Quiet on the Western Front. You have a soldier going back to his school with the teacher being like, you tell them why they should go join the war, and he's like, here's why war sucks, kind of a deal. So but also I wanted to touch on something real quick, just a thought that I had of a comparison from a movie that was released pretty recently, that reminds me of this movie but done worse, and it's Guy Ritchie's The Covenant.
I never saw that.
Okay. I won't really like spoil much about it, but the thing about it is what Dylan was talking about with putting it from the perspective of the German soldier who's going back and seeing a lot of his friends, family, just people he might know, kind of a deal. It's such an interesting thing, and how it doesn't sympathize and everything, but it's still showing us that perspective. But if you look at The Covenant, it's about how the U.S. government might utilize translators, and I think they might have been in Iraq, maybe Iran, I can't remember, or Afghanistan. I can't remember the specific country.
Yeah, like a Middle Eastern country. Yeah,
probably Iraq though. They have a similar thing where there's like a harrowing kind of thing, and the translator that Jake Gyllenhaal's character is bonding with basically gets stranded there, and then he goes back home, and then his whole thing is like, I need to go save him. But it's all from the perspective of the white guy going back home, and he's cushy life, and then he's like, I gotta go back and like be like the strong. I'm just like, why can't we see it from the other guy's perspective? Because he's the one that's actually like super affected by this. And why do we have to have Jake Gyllenhaal screaming on the phone? I don't know. I just
that's a good point.
Thought it was this was a more interesting way to tell that story.
Yeah. I just think it's so, like all you said was very fascinating. Yeah, just kind of going back to that idea, like glamorization and trying to like get the point across while also still entertaining. I mean, that's another thing. And Karly, you hit on that a little bit. It just didn't really grab your interest as much. And I think there's a benefit to that, and the fact that like, yeah, you're not glamorizing anything, but at the same time, like you want to still also make it inviting and engaging. But I was still swept up in some of the visuals. Like I love that like tracking shot where like kind of zooms out and you see like the battle in the background. Like again, like the war is still there. It's still, you know, tangentially happening. It's just not the focus in a way that like even like Zone of Interest recently, where it's like you're not seeing any of the atrocities. You're hearing it, but that's enough. Because you know what's going on. We're not gonna romanticize anything. We're not going to try to make anything spectacular. You know, we're not going to stage these sequences because we don't need to. You can fill it in with your own brain, you know, which I think is important.
I do, though, agree with Karly that I think that because it is a thriller, and I do feel like parts of that really shown, but I do feel like they could have really hammered the thrilling part, like made it really like, you know, like get into that sooner. Like
Right.
get them there sooner, and then have that part be really gripping, to where like you're more on the edge of your seat. And I feel like that, you know, maybe it wasn't so as much.
Yeah, cool. I mean, that's really all I have to say about Decision Before Dawn. I just think, yeah, it's a good message, even if you don't like the film. Like, you know, it's okay to stand up against, you know, what you are supposed to align with if it means doing the right thing. You know, we shouldn't all just be blind and loyal to who we're supposed to be. It's why people, you know, change religions when they get older. It's why they change homes. It's why they need to get out of their neighborhoods and see the world. It's why they, you know, have families and meet other people, you know, because sometimes you need to just branch out from your little bubble. And I think that's kind of, you know, what this film is saying in a very real life, high stakes situation, but in a general sense, you know, just like, you know, learn how to have empathy and see things from all angles, which I think is important. But Karly, you have anything else on this one?
No.
Okay. No worries. Decision Before Dawn, the Academy didn't have a lot to say about either because it only got 2 nominations and it didn't win any, but it did get nominated for picture and for film editing. So Decision Before Dawn, the sun had unfortunately set on its Oscar chances, but we will find a place in the sun for this next film, which is A Place in the Sun, oddly enough. Chad, tell us about A Place in the Sun.
Sure. A Place in the Sun, directed by George Stevens, written by Michael Wilson and Harry Brown. Cinematography by William C. Mellor. Music by Franz Waxman. Starring Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, Shelley Winters, Anne Revere, Keith Brassell, Fred Clark, Raymond Burr, Herbert Hayes, Shepard Strudwick, Frida Inescourt, Catherine Givney, Walter Sandy, Ted DeGorcia, and John Ridgely. Synopsis: an industrialist nepo baby, psych, a young man is offered a job at his rich uncle's factory, where he is faced with the decision to marry into another rich family or have a baby with a poor young woman. His decision leads him into a murder plot.
It's really a wild elevator pitch. I mean, you open, you're like, oh, great. Yeah. And I think that's what's great about this film is that like you don't get anything from the poster, you get nothing from like even the cast. It's like, oh, this is a romance with this guy and Elizabeth Taylor, and it's like, no, okay, if he's with this girl, okay, it's almost like It's a Wonderful Life. It's these 2 little kids, you know, they work together, they love each other, you know, they're happy, it seems. And then as the movie goes, it just spirals out of control in a controlled way. It's a controlled chaos, but the events are chaotic. But yeah, I mean, this was a shocker. I did not know what to expect from this one, and it was such a vague title as well. Like, A Place in the Sun gives you nothing, and that's okay, but it's also one of those things. Same as like Streetcar Named Desire. Like, there's nothing you can get from those titles to know anything about what those films are about, and even that film is something about desire, at least. This one, A Place in the Sun, I mean, I guess maybe we could kind of come to terms with the 3 of us what that might mean, and they do say it in one of the lines of dialogue. But yeah, I mean, where to start with this one? Chad, you're a horror thriller guy. I mean, this is horror per se. Maybe it is. What do you think of this one, Chad?
I mean, it's horror in the way that a lot of like, you know, Hitchcock movies would be, or Stephen King novels. Like Stephen King will sometimes write. Like there's like one called Dolan's Cadillac, where it's all about a guy who hates his boss, and he just like sits there and like makes this elaborate plot on how to murder this guy, and I think like kill him in his like Cadillac or whatever. And it's like it kind of feels like that. It feels like kind of like a Stephen King short story or whatever, you know, building up the idea of the guy who just kind of like entry level guy, and he's like trying to figure out where he's gonna go, and he starts this relationship with like a person that he is probably on his level, and then like he tries to like reach above and says maybe I'll go and try to become I guess, and decide that you can't like have your cake and eat it too as far as dating two women, and then when he tries to get away from this one woman, it decides that she's pregnant, and then he decides to kill her. It's just such a weird movie in that way, and then like the rest of the movie is that murder plot, is that like him just trying to get away. And I don't know, I found that really fascinating, just specifically because of what you were talking about. It's just like you don't expect it to go there, and it does, and then it's just really interesting. But I'm not sure like if it I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because also like you don't really have a lot to go off of with the title and the poster and all, but it's also like it's based on a novel called An American Tragedy, so you're like, okay, it's gonna have some sort of it's building to something, but it's not what you think it's gonna be. And even when you think it's gonna be what it is, you think maybe it's gonna be like I don't want to get into it too much because I want Karly to talk real quick, but like like Elizabeth Taylor, she's the villain. She's in on it. It's like a Sunrise thing where she's there. It's a murder plot, or it's about how he is on the run. But it really isn't a lot of that. It really just kind of wraps things up in a very unconventional way as well. We'll talk about all the Sunrise comparisons because I was thinking of it throughout as I was watching. I was like Sunrise.
I just got that because you mentioned it. I'm like, oh my god.
Which is why I'm glad it wasn't that, because it's two very different resolutions to the same inciting incident, kind of. But Karly, I'll let you talk. Sorry, because I have so much to say, but I want you to get a word in before we really spiral into our cacophony of thoughts on this one. But what do you think of Place in the Sun, Karly?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about this one. Like it's like, because when I was thinking back, because like after I finished it, I was like, oh, that was a pretty simple story. But then like when you think about it, it starts in a very different place than it ends, and it's very fascinating, especially like because it ends in such a dark place. Like, I really like this one. I think I love how our protagonist is such a complicated character. Like he's a dirty cheater. Like he's kind of not a good person. Like he's a bit of a dick, but also like his eventual fate, his whole situation just sucks. Like it's just a horrible situation for everyone involved. And like obviously the stuff he tries to do to get out of it is awful, but it's also like you can kind of understand, like you really feel for him on some level, because you're like, well, I know you want to be, of course you want to be with Elizabeth Taylor, like she's total hottie, of course you want to be with her, and not have to deal with raising a baby, but yeah, it's very complicated. It really makes you think a lot. One scene that really stuck out to me was the scene when Alice is trying to get an abortion, and because like my biased pro-choice thing, the first time I was watching it, I was like, oh, it's so gross how he won't let her get one. But then like I rewatched that scene, I was like, it doesn't seem like she wants one though. Like he's eating one because he wants her to have one. But it didn't seem like, when I was rewatching that scene, I was just like, yeah, she's doing this because she feels pressured. And like, it's not, that's not fair to her, because it seems like she does want that baby. It was just such a fascinating scene, because like, of course I'm going to be my biased pro-choice self when I'm watching it, but like rewatching it and like being able to like have the perspective of, pro-choice is pro-choice. Like if I'm pro-choice, I want her to have that baby if she wants that baby. Even if it means he wouldn't commit, but obviously he would commit, because in the time that's what you did. Either you were a garbage person or you would marry the girl you got pregnant. Back then there wasn't like scenarios where it's like, oh, we're not together, but we're raising this kid. Like back then it was like, no, you soiled her virtue or whatever, so you need to marry her. But I mean, that's just hitting the surface. There's so much to talk about with this movie, because that's just talking about like the situation. The ending is a whole other thing, and
Right.
yeah.
It turns into like a courtroom drama in a sense, because then you get that addition of oh gosh, what's his name? Is it Fred Clark? I think the defense attorney comes in, or Raymond Burr, the district attorney, or whoever it is. Like it almost starts to turn into like his movie in a way. And he comes in with such a sizzling energy too. But yeah, it's really fascinating you brought up the abortion, because it's one of those things where it's like this man murders because he can't just get a divorce, or he can't just like break up with his girlfriend, or they can't just get an abortion. It's one of those things that's so crazy to show you that at the time, murder was a more like valid choice to this person than like, let's try to get an abortion, or like, yeah, like let's divorce, or let's separate, or like it's weird that like all these taboos at the time, whereas now it's like, yeah, no brainer. You either get an abortion, or you get divorced, or you live a double life and you're just a scumbag. But the whole cheating thing, or the whole death thing, is like something that just you would never even think about. But it's true probably at this time that like just this toxic masculinity of like, well, I'm just gonna off the problem, and then that's what you see in so many mafia movies too, like in the 70s with like Godfather, and then even further with like Goodfellas. It's the idea of like, oh, I can just solve my problems by just offing them, and then I'll carry on with my life as normal. But the good news is that like this character clearly doesn't have the right emotional or like mental capacity to pull it off, and he's sloppy and he leaves bad. Like, I think part of the fun when you know where it's going is realizing how much he fucks up along the way. Like he gives, he shows the guy, he writes a fake name, but he's like taking a boat out in the middle of the day, like that's your alibi, like right there, like that guy is gonna turn you in, and running through the woods, and like all these little things that it's like, idiot, like if you're gonna pull off a murder, pull it off better. But it's also one of those things where you don't want him to, because it's murder, but also you're just invested in the plot and you want to see, is he gonna get away with it, is he not? And that's where it turns into like the Hitchcock of it all, of like, should I be rooting for this person? No, but also, do I want to see him somehow make his way out of this? Yeah, but at the same time, we care enough about Elizabeth Taylor that we also don't want her to be living this lie either. And you want to see her get her retribution, her justice, and stick it to the man too, because she has no idea this is even going on. And that's what makes it different than Sunrise, because Sunrise, it's the new girl plotting on how to off the old girl, but then it's about how he realizes he loves her all along. Whereas here, it's more like, no, I love this girl, and that's what adds another complex layer to it too. Is he's doing it because he loves this new girl. It's not that he like hates this older woman. It's just he wants this new thing, and she complicates that. It's not even this like hate for her, it's just a hate of the situation, and that's what makes it even more heartbreaking too, because there was love. We saw it earlier in the film. It's not like he couldn't stand her. It's not like it's an arranged marriage that he's like, oh, I can't stand this girl. It's like, no, they did have a connection once, which makes it all the more heartbreaking in Sunrise's case, and all the more polarizing in this one. Chad, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like it's I don't know if it's a little different, but it's just like, when he gets on like the boat with her, and like she's just sitting there like talking about just their life together and stuff like that, and just like that whole scene, which made me really sad, because I knew that what probably was going to end up happening, and I was hoping that maybe she would survive from the boat, and then like it would be like an attempted murder type of thing, and she would kind of be against him and all that stuff, and that would be the story. But she ends up dying pregnant, and for me, like being a husband and father, just like really made me upset, and stuff. And the fact that it's kind of interesting, because I think in the boat, doesn't he like decide not to do it, and then it's an accident how she dies?
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting, is that like, yes, but at the same time, is he relieved that it did happen as an accident? Yeah, but it's also like he,
in my opinion, it's just interesting, because he doesn't kill her, but he also doesn't save her.
Yep.
And like, I don't know if that was just my perspective of the scene, but I feel like he could have. Like, he didn't seem like he was struggling a ton. I feel like if he genuinely wanted to, he could have saved her, but he chose not to.
Well, and it's interesting because it's like, yeah, going out on the boat he wants to. On the boat he realizes, no, I should not be doing this. As it's happening, he's like, ooh, what do I do? Ooh, I'm just going to let it happen. And then it's also like, okay, now I can just say it was an accident because it was, right? It's almost like he's convincing himself that he didn't do it because it was an accident, you know, but again, he didn't save her. And I think that's just, there's so many layers to it. And that's why this is such a fascinating film, because you're also getting it from his perspective. And it makes it sad in that way, but it's also like you can 100% see where his head is at every second of the way. Whereas most films, like the villain, like all the great slashers, you know, you're never seeing things. You're seeing things visually from like Michael Myers' perspective at times, but it's about Laurie Strode battling this force of evil. Here we're in the perspective of the force of evil, and I think that's just so cool. It adds a little layer in a way that Chad said with like Hitchcock. Like it feels very Hitchcock in that way. A lot of this felt very Hitchcock, but even more like on Karly's note, like the women seem to have a little bit more not agency, but the point of it is that they don't have agency, and the film is trying to make that point. So it has a little bit more of a feminist edge, I think, than some Hitchcock stuff, even where they almost feel like chess pieces in those movies at times, like merely there for the murders or to be these femme fatales or whatever. But this, it's like, no, the women actually have voices in this thing. It just sometimes their voices are silenced, but we, the audience, are supposed to take that and want to fight for that, you know, for that justice.
And I think like it's interesting. I love the way that it ends, where he just gets his due, instant karma. You know, because he's sloppy. I wonder if they remade it today, if they would have ended it with him getting away scot-free, and then being like, you know, yeah, that's what happens. You know, white men can, you know, murder people and make a bunch of mistakes and then still be fine.
It's interesting that you view it that way, because like I was thinking like, yeah, he was a dick and an asshole, but like also like I don't think he deserved to die. Like I think like life in prison would have been much more just.
I will say I'm staunch against the death penalty. I forgot that he actually got the death penalty.
More so getting caught, you meant?
Yes, caught and like sentenced. I 100% agree with you about the death penalty. Although he's pushing it. He's pushing my patience with that shit.
Right. Yeah. And what I also love is that like I lost my train of thought, but there's still so much to talk about. Back to Elizabeth Taylor of it all. Like I do love how at the end she also gets a little bit more like of a final statement, because you could easily make that character such a generic like other girl, and you can also take the easy road and make her unlikable. But I think the reason that she is likable makes it complicated for the audience too, because you understand why their love is real. You understood why their love was real too, but you're also like, no, like you want him to be with her, but you don't want him to do this to be with her. But at the same time, it's like you don't want her to feel involved at all, because it's also interesting how their relationship doesn't exist after this happens either, because the second he comes back to Elizabeth Taylor, you would think it would just be like, okay, now we can finally be together, but there's so much weighing on his mind that their relationship's never going to be the same either, because you killed someone. You have that grief and that regret. You know, you can't live normally in society after doing that if you're this guy, because I don't think he's sociopathic in the way that like I feel like he actually feels his emotions. Like I feel like he actually like lets it weigh on him, and that's why, you know, even though he's doing this to have a great free life with her, he's never going to have that free life with her, because he's always going to be having this in the back of his mind. That adds another layer of complication to it, which I think is just so fascinating, you know?
Totally.
Yeah, I loved Elizabeth Taylor's character. Like I feel like she played it so well, where you're kind of like, I don't know about her, but like she's just so, by the end of the movie, she's so genuine that you just love that character so much, and she just like you understand why you'd kill for her. I mean, she's great. And
even if they did the Bonnie and Clyde thing, where at the end she's like, all right, baby, I'm getting you out of here. Let's go. Let's hit the road. Like, that would also still be a cool movie. I think that's the thing, is like any version of this you do is interesting. If you make her a secret accomplice, it's interesting. If you make her this tragic figure who was blind to it all like this and gets her final moment of like firm, like, F you, that's great as well. If you have the Sunrise thing where he has a change of heart and they fall in love again, we've seen it before, but it's fascinating. You know, like I love how every version of this thing, no matter where it ends, is fascinating, because they've set it up so well that no matter where it goes, you're so invested that you're going to follow it through. And I love that about any film, where like it can have you hooked so hard early on that like no matter which avenue it chooses to drive down, you're in for the ride. And I really like that about it. Yeah. Cool. Place in the Sun. Do we have any inference of what that might mean? Or I mean, I know they mention it at some point. It's like a throwaway line of dialogue, but
I guess because I don't remember that, but I guess I would think that it's the ideal of what the guy wants that he'll never get.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Also, I was thinking also like they're out in the open on the lake. You think you're hidden, but you're really just in a place of the sun. But he does it like kind of after like afternoon when it's quieter and darker. So I don't know. But also, we haven't talked about the technicals, but the way those sequences are shot are so great too. Just like that kind of first person on the boat, just back and forth. The editing in this thing is great. I'm looking now, one editing, of course. Just the way it's edited, just the way it kind of bounces back. Also between Elizabeth Taylor and Shelley Winters' characters, and just kind of going back and forth and trying to balance those two romances. It's just so fascinating. Even the scene where they are in love before everything goes wrong, when they conceive the baby, just the way that's lit. It reminded me of like Meet Me in St. Louis, how it's like dark and they're outside the house and you hear like the raindrops and the shadow and the window panes. Like I don't know. I just love the use of space in this thing as well. But cool. Any other thoughts, Karly, on A Place in the Sun?
I don't think I'm sure there's something we're missing because it's just there's so much in that movie and just so much to talk about. But I think we hit most of it.
Yeah. And I'll bring up Montgomery Clift later, but it also involves Marlon Brando. So we'll talk about it later. But there's another point I wanted to make, but we can talk about that when we get to Streetcar. But that's it for A Place in the Sun. It wins 6 of the 9 awards it's up for. So people thought it was going to win Best Picture for a reason. It wins Best Director for George Stevens, Best Screenplay, Best Scoring, Dramatic or Comedy, Cinematography, Black and White, Costume Design, Black and White, Film Editing. It's also nominated for Picture, nominated for Montgomery Clift for Best Actor, and nominated for Best Actress for Shelley Winters. Very cool that they made her a lead, because she is. And I think most people nowadays would probably put her in supporting, but I'm glad she was nominated for a lead, because it is as much her story as it is his. So I love that. But where do we go from here? Or in Latin, Quo Vadis. see the easy segue when the literal movie title is Where Do We Go? Or Where Do You Go? Or Where Will We Go? I don't know. But where will we go, Chad? Quo Vadis, tell us about it.
I thought you were going to start singing a Buffy song for a second there. But
right? Or a song from Hair. Where do I go? Yeah.
Quo Vadis, directed by Mervyn LeRoy. Written by S.N. Berman, Sonia Levian, and John Lee Mahan. Cinematography by Robert Surtees and William V. Schall. Music by Miklos Rosa. Starring Robert Taylor, Deborah Kerr, Leo Ginn, Peter Ustinov, Patricia Laffin, Finlay Curie, Abraham Sofaer, Marina Berti, Buddy Bear, Felix Elmer, Nora Swinburne, Ralph Truman. I think that's about it. A synopsis. Nero, a vicious, spoiled Roman dictator, feels threatened by a new religion called Christianity and makes Rome suffer so he can make an enemy out of the followers of this new religion.
It's funny because earlier we made the comparison with Vincente Minnelli, with Gigi in American Paris, and we're going to talk about Tennessee Williams. But Karly, do you remember who you gave your Best Actress to on your episode? Do you remember?
No, I don't. Was she in here?
It was Deborah Carr for Separate Tables. So there you go. We found another connection. Another connections. You can take a shot, or if you're playing a drinking game. We never established that, but if you want to be playing a drinking game, please have at it. I'm going to open this one just because this is the one. Off air, I was telling Karly, I have the least to say about the longest film, which is kind of weird because you would think there would be so much to say. I think it's a really well made, like, biblical historical epic. Not even biblical, but it feels biblical in the way it's like just so big and grand, and it's obviously dealing with religion, so my brain went to biblical. But yeah, like this really big religious piece, and it's, I mean, the production design is so good, and we'll talk a little bit about like some of the seams of green screen that you can see at times, but I mean, for the time, it's just really impressive. And I remember reading, I think this was the most expensive film ever made at the time. That's why I said earlier we have some like history. Yeah, its budget at the time was like $7.6 million, which for then was a lot for 1950s money. And it single-handedly rescued the MGM bankruptcy, because MGM was going bankrupt, and this was such a big hit that this ended up being like it saved it. It saved a studio, and we rarely see that. A lot of the times we see studios go under, or they have a bunch of hits that help revive it. But this was really a godsend, no pun intended, I guess, for that studio. So it was really cool just that like this big epic was such a big hit. But it's also interesting that we don't talk about it now. Because I believe Technicolor was invented in 52 maybe, or it was first like utilized in like early 50s, to where like this is one of the last like non-Technicolor movies maybe. I might be wrong with this. This might actually be Technicolor, but I will fact check that. But
I have a dumb question. What is Technicolor? How is that different than like color?
I think it's just an actual like process of film editing that actually it was introduced in 1916. I don't know what I'm thinking of.
The Wizard of Oz.
Right, and Gone with the Wind. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying about Technicolor. Maybe, you know what it was? Widescreen Technicolor was not invented till the 52. So that's what I was going for, because I remember reading it somewhere, and I was wondering why it was a tidbit in my brain. Yeah, widescreen Technicolor would be like the next year. So this also has like a little bit more of a compact aspect ratio. So like in the later 50s, you'd see like this like kind of like more broad, like the epics actually felt wide and expansive in a way that this isn't always. But I just thought that was interesting that this is one of the last great. Yeah, go ahead.
Is it the process of like coloring film that the camera can't shoot it natively or something?
Right. Yeah. It has something to do with like the actual color rendering and color grading, and I think it was actually I haven't looked a lot into Technicolor, but it's those really striking like real like deep rich color use of color. But this was Technicolor, but it was before like we had like Technicolor widescreen, which is like what like Lawrence of Arabia was made on, like these really like big kind of like how nowadays we have like IMAX cameras. It's like it was just like the last big epic before the next kind of like level up in filmmaking was. So you had Technicolor in 1939, then you jump to like widescreen Technicolor, which was like in the 50s, because I remember like Lady and the Tramp was the first animated widescreen Technicolor, so I know it was around the 50s. But so that was just like a cool tidbit. So I think like visually this is just such a cool like visual masterpiece.
This was like a Christopher Nolan film back then.
Right. And it set a trend, because we would see like 10 Commandments came out like the very next few years, and then what else was around this time? Like Lawrence of Arabia, all the Ben-Hur. I think this was definitely like a trendsetter in that sense. Finally expanding it. I don't have much else to say personally, unless like I'm sure conversation will bring up some more thoughts. But I just wanted to hit on the technicals, because like for me that's what I took away from this. Like I was like, wow, the technicals, and then there was also a performance that I really dug as well. But I'll let you all talk about it. But Karly, what did you think of Quo Vadis or Quo Vadis?
So this was one that I was dreading going in, because I've seen very few like very few like back in the classic epics. Like Lawrence of Arabia has been on my watch list forever. I just haven't gotten around to it. I haven't seen very many epics. And when I saw the premise, I was like, oh God, that sounds so boring to me. Just because I'm not very, I'm a woman, so I don't think about the Roman Empire very often. So
I love how you're leaning into meme culture there. Thank you for that.
But I did end up liking this quite a bit. Once I got past all the characters, like figuring out who was actually important, because there's all these people with different names, and I'm just like, oh God, I don't know who's important. Once I figured that out, like I really started being into this. Half my notes are about calling the main guy a creep, though, because like the comments he makes about is it Legia or
Legia.
Comments he makes about them are so like he's like lovely women shouldn't have the time to think that deeply. Like he keeps threatening her and being like, I could be worse, and it's just bad. I'm just like, this guy, and then she like falls in love with him, and I'm just like, footage not found. Like when did she fall in love with him? Like when he was threatening her? It's just, so the romance did not work for me, but I did like the religion stuff. I liked the stuff about Christianity, because Christianity is so not an underdog religion currently. So like seeing the foundation of that, and I'm not sure how true this is to the reality, but I thought that was really cool, and I really liked what it had to say like about hatred and like using people as scapegoats. Like it's very, very Nazi Germany, like finding this one group to like pin everything on. That's not all the thoughts I have, but I'll let Chad talk, and I'm sure the rest of my thoughts will come up in conversation.
Whenever you do get to Lawrence of Arabia, I think you'll be surprised that it's fascinating. Which I had the same like kind of reservations about it, and a lot of these movies I have similar reservations about. Especially if it's like 3 hours long. A lot of the times I'm like, okay, earn that kind of a deal. I feel like this didn't really do that. I think that's maybe one of my biggest things is like, sometimes movies feel like they need to be an epic, you need it to be really long. And I just don't know if, like, for me, like, I do think I felt like I got like bored, quite too often in this. Although I do think there's, with Dylan starting off with the technicals, I think is the right move because, I do think that is one of the big things. I think some of the performances are really great. I like, because I've always heard about Nero and like, some of the like, Italian, like dictators and stuff like that. Just never really knew that much about them other than they were like terrible. And then seeing that kind of a thing when we're in a time where our country might be going towards a dictatorship, kind of like hit all too real for me watching this in this time where I'm just like, wow, okay, kind of just seeing full dictatorship on force about like this guy who is Nero, who is like, you would think he'd be like this, like Joffrey from Game of Thrones kind of a deal. And I'd say sort of, but not really. Like, he's just kind of like oafish and dumb and just like, listen to me play the music and stuff like this. It's like, oh my God, is that what Nero was like? Jesus. And speaking of Jesus, and then you got like all the like Christian stuff in the movie, which I think in some ways it feels a little like kind of preachy, where it's just like, and then I heard the good word, and then you get to see the heavens open up and stuff, and it's just like it gets a little kind of mystical in that way, I guess. To where people used to be a lot more religious back in the day. So I feel like that's why this movie was so popular, is that people would love seeing stuff like that. And for us, maybe we like seeing more of like a secular kind of thing. Like, you could see a character saying something, but you don't have to see that something happen too, and stuff. So I mean, I felt a lot of the choices and decisions to be interesting and whatnot. I felt if it were tighter and had more of a focus, I feel like it could have been a lot better, because I did like a lot of the stuff, and then I think all of like Karly's criticisms were valid. I'm fascinated that she actually ended up liking the movie overall, because I didn't think that you would. I thought this was going to be the one that you've been like, I did not like that. That was way too long. It was hard to get through. But yeah, I think there are some like nuggets of things that are just very fascinating to see, especially if you're interested in like dictatorships and hierarchy, and just how the one guy who is the yes man to him but secretly hates him, and then always like, no, that was he's the one guy that will criticize him, but in a way that's like helpful, and people are like, oh, you just criticized Nero, and then Nero's like, thank you for criticizing me. Like, no one would sit and tell me that was actually bad. Maybe I should burn Rome. What the fuck? What? Kind of a deal. It was like, a lot of crazy shit like that. But then you get to see that excellent moment at the end where he gets to actually like, like Nero's like, he dies, and then Nero defends him. He's like, I need to write a song for him or something like that. And then he's like, and then he learns like, oh, he secretly fucking hated you, dude. It's like, oh shit. So then he like has a full turn. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the movie.
Yeah.
I wish it were a little shorter.
So while y'all were talking, I did a little bit of a history lesson on Technicolor, just because I wanted to get my facts straight. I was listening, I promise. But like the film, I like looking at your beautiful faces. I wasn't really absorbing everything that was coming in my ears, but I did hear all the main points, and I agree. This Technicolor stuff is very interesting though. So like the actual Technicolor process, it was the studio that did the Technicolor. Like it was a studio, like it was a program name. It was like Technicolor was the thing. But what they did was it was like a dyeing process, similar to how like I guess when you have like red rooms for like photography, when you're like printing photos or whatever, like something to do with like the actual like printing of the colors. Anyway, they had like these really bulky like 3-strip cameras that would like utilize the Technicolor or whatever. This was so the fun fact is actually that this is one of the last films to use Technicolor, period, because then in the 50s you started to see more the cameras were kind of formatted to better use this equipment because the higher grain of the image was kind of unsuitable for like a lot of the big studio works because they were so elaborative with their color and they were also long. Like this one was such a long epic. So Kodak actually introduced the first 35 millimeter color motion picture negative film in 1950. So like 1950 was like the point where they started like converting the cameras to make them less bulky to be able to adhere to the style and being able to like do what Technicolor did, but in a more condensed fashion and in a way that didn't involve so many big steps and big productions. It's like the difference between like film and digital, but like in a more niche sense. But I was reading a lot about it. It was very interesting. But yeah, this was like one of the last like big epics with the traditional Technicolor. And then it would become like the new kind of style of Technicolor that we'd see with like CinemaScope and all these other things that started to take over, which I know we talked about a little bit with VistaVision, Chad with the Brutalist, but like, you know, these newer techniques that would come in like VistaVision, CinemaScope, all these different things. But like, yeah, Technicolor was like the traditional method of doing things. This is one of the last films. So I had a little Freudian slip earlier on when I was like, this is one of the first Technicolor films. Y'all are like, no, it's because in my notes I wrote first, but it was last, one of the last like proper old school Technicolor films. So that clears it all up for all the people trolling in the comments probably, but it's okay. Listen, I this is my one free day a week, so I did all my notes today, but I did all my watching throughout the month, and it was great, and I'm glad we talked about this. Peter Ustinov, just had to bring him up because he is just such a great actor, and he didn't win the Oscar for this, but it's just very cool that they cast him as Prince John in Robin Hood, the animated film, because he just like has that energy of like that little like clown, like almost like a little kid on the throne. You know, in Prince John, he like sucks his thumb in Robin Hood, but you can't stop watching him. It's just so engaging and entrancing. But any more thoughts on Nero's character? He's also the villain of Star Trek, the 2009 Star Trek. The character Eric Bana's character is named Nero.
Yeah,
so
I thought his performance was so good. Like, I thought he did such a good job of like towing that line and like making you genuinely believe this idiot like believes all the things he believes. And you're just this man child in charge of everything. I don't know if I was just me, but I picked up on some kind of queer vibes with his relationship with Petronius. He was like yelling about how his last thoughts were of me, and he like how Petronius understood his soul and listened to his songs. And I was like, damn, this guy feels pretty strongly about Petronius.
But and we see that trope kind of carried on in future films. Like, I mean, like Dune, we see that a little bit with like the kiss between Stellan Skarsgård and Austin Butler, and you also see it with like the Gladiator films, like Gladiator 2. It's very queer coded, the villains in that film. They're just very flamboyant in general because, you know, they have the wealth, they have the money. Let's you know, show it off. You know, it's quite literally being flamboyant, being extra overt in showing off your riches, I guess. But that's also why I love those films like Gladiator 2, because like the villains, they chew the scenery, and I love a movie where the villain just like chews it all up. It's the best MCU villains, the best Harry Potter villains. It's the ones who really like just like chew that scenery, which I love.
I think that goes to show you like just different cultures and different times, because like only now, or not now, but like only like recent modern history, it feels like have we been so like toxic masculinity where it's like, you know, men can't wear makeup unless you're an actor or something, and you know, men can't kiss other men and stuff like that. And it feels like back in those times that was all pretty normal. Like men wear makeup, they wore togas and dresses and skirts and whatever, you know. And I feel like wasn't as macho. So I feel like Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people online recently saying like, keep drag out of theater, do more shows.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, do you know how they performed all those Shakespeare plays back in the day, right? They didn't cast women; they were all little boys in drag. So, I don't know. Do some history, people. Learn some history. The history of this film, though, is not that kind. It only gets 8 nominations. That's still a lot of nominations, but it doesn't get any wins. Unfortunately, It just happens that there was another Technicolor film that won Best Picture that took all the text from it, and all the acting awards went to a film we're about to talk about. So, it was nominated for Best Picture, 2 supporting actor nominations. One for Leo Genn, and then one for Peter Ustinov. Best scoring, dramatic or comedy, best art direction, color, cinematography, color, costume design, color, and film editing. I'm sure they desired at least one Oscar on the day, but unfortunately they didn't get that. But what Karly desired was to talk about another Tennessee Williams play adaptation on Picture This. So we're going to do that right now. Chad, would you desire to tell us about A Streetcar Named Desire?
A Streetcar Named Desire, directed by Elia Kazan, written by Tennessee Williams and Oscar Saul, cinematography by Harry Stradling, music by Alex North, starring Vivian Lee, Marlon Brando, Kim Hunter, Carl Malden, Rudy Bond, Peg Hillius, Nick Dennis, Wright King, Edna Thomas, Richard Garrick, and Mickey Kunn. Synopsis: a woman arrives in New Orleans to stay with her sister after losing their family plantation, only to butt heads with her brother-in-law and face her inner demons. Based on the play A Streetcar Named Desire.
By Tennessee Williams, that's right.
Yeah.
So, very interesting, because last time we talked, I don't know if y'all remember, I was not the biggest fan of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Chad really liked it. Karly was somewhere in the middle, acknowledged the problems, but generally liked it. So I'm very interested now to hear. I just realized what our connection for A Place in the Sun was, Elizabeth Taylor, because she was in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. So every film here has a connection, except for Decision Before Dawn. So we're going to have to try to figure out what that might be. It's going to be very interesting to talk about it now, because this is a very different adaptation, a very different story than Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, but it does have a very similar quality. I mean, Tennessee Williams films, they're very sticky, they're very sweaty, they're very lived in, I guess is the best word to say. You could feel the beads of sweat rolling off these characters' foreheads, if you will. So I'm very excited to hear what you guys think of this one, because we've all talked about the other one. But I'll start with you, Karly. What did you think of Streetcar Named Desire?
This was an interesting one. I didn't really know what to expect going in, because I'd only watched one other movie that based on the Tennessee Williams play. It's hard, because so much of this is it's very psychological, and there's just so many dynamics. I'll just start with Marlon Brando is fantastic in this movie. He plays Stanley so freaking well that I'm just blown away almost, because you can see why Stella fell in love with him, but also you can see exactly why she needs to leave him. He's such a dirtbag. And I just love how introducing Blanche into this already kind of strange relationship it just adds a lot of layers, and seeing her psychology and how how the three interact with each other is just so fascinating. But yeah, that's initially my thoughts. I'd love to hear. I'm sure there's definitely more going on, because there's such a complex movie, but those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah. Chad, we'll go to you next, because I know we have talked a lot about Brando. So, we've had our ups with Godfather. We've had some of our downs, Sayonara. But I'm very interested to hear what you think of him, but also just this movie in general, this play adaptation. Chad, what do you think of Streetcar?
I love this movie. I thought that all the performances are great in it. To be honest, it's just an acting and writing showcase, I feel with this one, because it is so focused and central on specifically 3 characters, but some other characters in there too, especially the guy that she likes. But dude, I just found this so fascinating, just seeing how well really the only good character in the movie is Stella. Everyone else has some sort of baggage or some sort of ulterior motive, or is just kind of crazy.
Right. And even Stella, who's obviously the most pure she can't leave this guy. That's her flaw. Is that
That,
she's
that's
just
her big
so
flaw.
blinded. Yeah.
And honestly, I think Stella is the main character of the movie because she's the one who decides to leave at the end. You know, she finally gets it. I mean, it takes her sister being like committed to figure that out, but you know, she finally does, and I love that ending. And she's like, you know, I'm gonna take that baby and go upstairs and stuff. And she did it once before, but you know, and he probably right after it ends is going, "You Stella," you know, kind of a deal. And I just love that vibe. I love the vibe, like the audiobook. I was listening to some of the audiobook of the play. It was really interesting. They got really like those New Orleans like kind of accents and vibes to it that I just think is really great. I feel like they somewhat capture that vibe of the New Orleans vibe in the movie too. You know, I feel like they, like you guys talked about it being like lived in and stuff. You feel like he's been bowling for years. She's been going to watch him and, you know, being kind of like a, you know, a simp for him, I guess. It's just kind of like, I'm gonna, you know, support him no matter what. And like, even like all of his like problematic stuff, you know, she's just defensive of and supportive of, and it's just like, you know, that's just how he is. And I feel like that's a lot of the toxic relationships that you see is just, you know, people accepting things even if they're harmful to that person. And then you get to see Blanche, who is a person who is going to end up telling her, you know, don't what's the big line, like don't lay with the brutes, don't go down with the brutes, or kind of a deal. And you're better than this. But she's also got like this whole thing with her where she's this, you know, wealthy like aristocrat type of thing. Like she wants to wear the most elegant stuff and look really good, so she kind of like looks down on the place, I feel like, and whatnot. And then he's like, you know, she's hiding something. So there's this whole dynamic going back and forth with all of it. And you know, you can really feel that tension between Blanche and Stanley throughout, which I just think is so fascinating. And then it ends with and I think they just imply it, the rape that happens. And that's the big thing that causes Stella to turn and realize, like, and at first, like, I think she like doesn't even really believe it, but then you know, in the back of her mind, she's like, I do believe it, because
and she can even tell with like the body language at the end too. I feel like that's another way she can kind of pick that up.
Yeah, and then you have the whole thing about, you know, this is the you know, what the licorice pizza and you know, what's that other movie, Natalie
Cuckoo's
Portman?
Nest? Oh yeah, May December
kind of thing, about like where she, you know, I don't know, falls in love with her student,
with a minor,
and it's like her student, I think, right? Or at least in the play.
Well, that's why she got fired from teaching. Yeah,
that's
so
right.
It's implied to be one of the students, or at least a student at the school.
And there's like a difference in the play, because I was trying to think about it because of Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, where there was the, you know, the subtext, the homosexual subtext,
right, and the code of it all.
I think that's also here as well.
Yes. So yeah, I was gonna bring this up because I think my biggest flaws with Cat on a Hot Tin Roof is that, like, in abiding by the code, you're erasing certain things about the characters that we're following in the movie. The difference with this one is that the character that the story's changed a little bit, and it's not even that it's changed, it's just not really said, is that her husband, who killed himself because he was gay,
right,
outed, and then she couldn't live with that, or he couldn't live with the guilt of being embarrassed to be caught or whatever, and then he killed himself. That's in the play. Well, here it's a little bit more referred or inferred. I don't think it's overtly said.
Yeah, I had to rewatch that scene like several times. I was like, there's something here that's not making sense.
And that's what the code, you know, because we're still abiding by code here, so that was erased. But what I do like about this more is that, like, that is a detail about a backstory about another character who's not really on screen. And obviously, I think just the fact that he killed himself is still just kind of enough. Not enough. Nothing's, you know, that's awful. But in the context of this, like, I don't think you needed that extra layer. Whereas in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, I think erasing the fact that not Burt Reynolds. Oh my God, Paul Newman's character. Paul Newman's character is gay is like, a big thing to leave out. Where
Yeah.
I think that's why this one, like, it works okay in the subtext, and that's why I like this one. And I think even the rape, like, you can't show it, but like, it's implied enough that like you know what happened, and you don't need to show it. Like on stage, obviously they don't show too much, but it happens on stage. So it's also one of those things where I think like this time the code did not affect what is ultimately important about the story, which are the themes, relationships, characterizations, which don't change for these three, which I think is important. If it had really taken away a certain element of one of these three characters, then like it would have been a little harder, like the other film. But I do think, adapted wise, like it was adapted pretty well, as well as it could be with the code, while also still inferring enough to at least give the audience something to chew on. But also for audiences who are like, I don't want to talk about gayness, they don't have to think about it because it doesn't give you that excuse. But like you can ignore it if you want to, I guess, is the point. But yeah, that's the adaptation stuff. And Chad, you were going to say something about that.
Yeah. What I think I got from the play aspect of it was that it wasn't the fact that he killed himself because he was ashamed of being gay. It was that he killed himself because of their relationship and the fact that he was like emotionally invested in their relationship, and that she was basically like, you're weak kind of a deal. Okay. And so that she was like emotionally abusive to him.
Right. And I think that adds a lot too, because like you said, like each of these characters has something about them that is off-putting in a way. Like Blanche is not a perfect character by any means. She's a tragic character because ultimately what happens to her is very sad, because she ultimately is someone who has mental health and mental health issues and needs help, and I think that's the thing, is like she needs that, but she's not getting that, and who she's around is not helping her. Like that's what she needs, but she's not able to get it. And you even have like Marlon Brando's character. He's a very problematic character, but in the end of the day, what he wants is just a private life with his wife, and he's not able to get that. And that's a reasonable thing to want. You're early in a relationship, you don't have a kid, you want to have a kid, she's pregnant, but you have like a new roommate coming into the situation. Like that is a very empathetic way to like approach a character. Like I get it, like I get where he's coming from. What he does about it is bad, and what Blanche does about certain things is bad, but you understand where they're coming from. And even Stella staying with him, it's a bad thing, but you understand why she is, because also they cast Marlon Brando, who very fresh new actor. A lot of people loved seeing him visually. He was eye candy. That's another reason why Stella wants to stay with him. He's just an attractive guy. And I think that's what's so interesting about this film, is that each person has something they need but can't get because another character stands in their way. And even though they go about it in terrible ways, we still understand why each of them do what they do, because ultimately that is what their goal is. It's just they can't get it because of A, B, C. And I think that's what's so interesting,
Yeah, I thought Blanche's character was really interesting. Like her character more than anyone else made me want to rewatch this. Oh, Till's gone. Her character more than anyone else made me want to rewatch this movie. Just kind of to see the progression of her mentally breaking down, because she starts the movie already pretty unstable. Like you can already tell she's starting on shaky ground. And I really want to rewatch and just see how all the little small things throughout the movie lead to her like full breakdown, because it's not just sexual assault, it's like a lot of many things that lead up to that just breaking the dam and her being committed.
I mean, you can see like even throughout, like just every time like her deceased ex-husband is mentioned, like she kind of breaks down. You feel like I guess she was guilty over it, but also like the idea that relationship in general is just kind of problematic. I mean, maybe today we see it as problematic, then maybe not as much. I don't even really know what the times were like then, because obviously they got married. But yeah, like you get to see that like she's troubled when she gets there, but then slowly like gets even more troubled and stuff. So
yeah. I'm really excited that you said you liked all the performances, Chad, because I was worried, because Marlon Brando is such a particular performer that at times it's like it's too much. But I think for this film, like his energy is just perfect for this role, and I think that's why sometimes he is controversial, because sometimes his energy is too much for a role. Like we talked about, what was it, Mutiny on the Bounty, where it was almost like a little too much, just movie star Marlon Brando. But here it's like the fact that he is a little manic, the fact that he isn't like the most eloquent speaker, the fact that he's a little bit more rough around the edges, a little more ragged, actually really adds to that character and makes him almost kind of pathetic in a way, in a way that I think like knowing who Marlon Brando is also kind of fitting, because it's like, this is a man who just like had such a different approach to the craft that at times was problematic. He was getting in fights with people on set. He was a method actor. He's one of the first method actors. And this is what I was going to bring up with Montgomery Clift, because the three like founders of method acting, I guess, or the three actors who started this like wave was Marlon Brando, James Dean, and Montgomery Clift. So it's like one of those things where he like was doing something that was kind of unheard of at the time. This is one of the first movies known for like method acting, and I could see how that could be a very dangerous thing, especially for a role like this. But at the same time, it's like that's exactly who Stan Lee is. It's someone who's controversial, tough to be around, but ultimately like cares so much that he's willing to do things that are just so unfathomably problematic, in the same way that Montgomery Clift does in A Place in the Sun. It's like, we get it, you love this person, but like what you're doing is not right. And I think that's just who Marlon Brando was as a guy. And I think that's why I think this kind of unlocks a lot of his career that like we see in later years, is like, you know, he just cared about the work so much that at a point it became dangerous and he became a problem. But at the same time, like, it gave us some of the best performances. Vito Corleone, Apocalypse Now, this. Like, I really think that's what's so interesting. And we'll talk about On the Waterfront, which he won the Oscar for, which is also an Elia Kazan directed film. So, you know, and that was only a few years later. So it's really interesting to just see how his career had evolved, but now kind of going back to, like, this is his second role ever, you know, seeing where he was at. And the fact that all four of these actors did it on stage too. So Vivien Leigh did the London. So I believe the show came out in like the late 40s. Vivien Leigh did it in London, and then Carl Malden, Kim Hunter, and Marlon Brando did it on Broadway. So it was all four of them basically reprising their roles. It's kind of like Fences, where Viola Davis and Denzel had already done the roles. So yes,
I didn't know that. That's so
yes,
cool.
they're doing it in a film sense, but like it's a different medium. But like they've lived with these characters now for years, so it's also like this extra added thing of like, yeah, like at times you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is insufferable, but it's like, but it's also a great performance because he is insufferable, because he's supposed to be, but also you understand him and you get him. Like, I feel like this is the most humanity I've seen in a Marlon Brando performance, where it's not just the movie star, there's actual character work going on. But is it character work, or is it him just living in the character? Yes, and like it's both maybe. And I think that's what's so fascinating about it. Although it is off-putting, but I think purposefully so, you know. But he's also the only one who doesn't win, maybe because he's still new to the scene. But it's also weird that like of all the iconic performances, he's the one who doesn't win, and it's for Humphrey Bogart giving a performance in a movie that is not even in his top 10 best. So it's like very interesting just how his whole, you know, this whole story panned out for him, you know?
Yeah. Well, very well said. I think that's very interesting, just to think about like the real life guy informing the actor and vice versa and all that. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. And I really am interested to see On the Waterfront. Like, I'm very excited because I've never seen it. And I feel like that is, you know, probably going to be another performance that kind of wins me over on Marlon Brando, because I even like love his performance in The Godfather, even though sometimes the mush mouth just kind of pisses me off, even in The Godfather a little bit. Like that voice I can't stand sometimes, but it's a great performance nonetheless. But like, I feel like you have to have a specific, like that works in The Godfather. That works probably in On the Waterfront, and that works here, but it doesn't work in like Sayonara, I feel like, or Mutiny on the Bounty, even though I didn't hate his performance in Mutiny on the Bounty. But here, I feel like the whole mushmouth, like mumbling, you can barely like understand his, you know, every other word that you might not be able to understand. But I think it works here because, like, I don't know, you can think about like, you know, New Orleans, Cajun, like kind of a deal. Like, you know, people kind of talk like that sometimes. Where, I mean, I don't think he's Cajun, but, you know, still maybe like the vernacular around there, people just kind of like regular working people might just talk like that sometimes.
Yeah.
And also he, you know, drinks a lot and stuff like that. So, you know, I feel like he does really become that character. Flaws and, you know, sympathetic qualities and just everything else. So yeah, this is one that when people go, Marlon Brando is one of the greatest actors ever, I'll go as a whole, maybe not, but like when you look at a specific performance, this is one of them I think that you can say is pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Karly, any thoughts on Marlon?
Yeah, it's wild that he won his first Oscar just like 3 years later. Like, that's because usually they don't give. Was it Best Actor or Best Supporting?
Actor, yeah, he's
Yeah,
only won Best
usually they
Actor
don't
twice.
give Best Actor to the young guys, so that's really fascinating.
Yeah, because also like this is a wave of cinema that we're experiencing. Because like James Dean bursts onto the scene at this time. Elizabeth Taylor's still young and rising. Like this is the era of like those really classic movie stars. Like you have like Humphrey Bogart, who's like almost phasing out by now, which is interesting. But yeah, it's just really cool to see like this new wave of actors just kind of emerge and be young. Like even Vivian Leigh, I think she's so fascinating too because I mean, Scarlett in Gone with the Wind is a Southern belle, and I think so is Blanche. But something about this character just has so much more nuance, and also so much more. Honestly, she probably does a lot worse physically in this, but also has so much more depth and like empathy as well. Whereas like Scarlett in Gone with the Wind is such a complicated character as well. But I feel like she's like kind of more the Southern belle ingenue. Whereas here she is, but she's it's almost like the Gloria Swanson thing in Sunset Boulevard, where it's like an ingenue past her prime, and it's like her trying to like grapple onto the past, but also the demons of the past like haunting her in quite a literal sense. We hear all those like visions and like those things that echo in her mind. Like I love those sequences where she's like hearing things repeated, and it's like an actual physical trauma, like Inside Out style, where like you're in the head of this character. So I just really enjoy her portrayal here because I feel like she could have just done Scarlett O'Hara again, but I feel like Blanche is just such a complicated character and one of the most tragic characters. Like we've said, like these characters do really unfathomable things both on and off screen, but like you feel for her, like when she's getting committed at the end, like it is sad, especially because she's always like, I always depended on the kindness of strangers. And is that a line of, I know what you're doing and fuck you, but like I'll be the bigger person and I'll go? Or is it just quite literally naivete, gullible, yay, great, a stranger, I'll trust him? And either way, it's sad.
I also think she might have like just a little bit of like schizophrenia or something, because she's like she like goes to that, like she's like so afraid and trying to run away of being committed, and then she sees something in that doctor or whatever, and is like,
just by taking off his hat,
you'll take care of me. Kind of just like becomes a different person almost, with the different wants and desires, and you're like, desires.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a dog that has been through abuse. When you go to pet it, and like sometimes if a man goes to pet, it'll back up, and then if a woman comes over, like it'll run right to it. It's just one of those things where maybe when you're conditioned time and time again, and like the same types of people or same things have been haunting you, like it's just this emotional trigger that is not even fueled by this. It's just gut. It's just you recognize it, boom, like red flag, sirens go off. It's like a metal detector. Like it's very interesting, and I think that's why Blanche, like, it's funny because like you spotlighted Stella as like the main character, or like the character who's the center of it all, and like I know you started by talking about Brando, and like for me it's like Vivian Leigh. Like it's just, and that's the thing is like this is it's a four-hander honestly, because I also think Carl Malden's great even though he's not in as much. But like,
I think you could say it about any of them is the main kind
but
of
it's
thing,
interesting. Yeah, like it's Stanley's story, it's Stella's story,
it's like
Blanche's story,
like
but it's
last year's Challengers that's
exactly.
very popular. You could probably say that about it's any of their stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I also love how the Stella moment that is memed to death is like kind of inconsequential and comes at like a kind of random time in the middle of the movie where it's and he does it a little bit toward the end as well, but like the big moment where he's on his knees, Stella, is like in the middle of the movie just after like a poker game, and she's like going up to her room.
It's also apparently what Tommy Wiseau used to audition. So there you go.
Sorry guys, I had a technical malfunction. But did you pause or did you continue?
We just paused.
Okay. Is there anything else on
because you went, so I thought that meant pause.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it was more of like I'll be right back. Yeah, I got to figure out my mic thing for next time. Maybe if it's just getting a new adapter or whatever. But cool. Anything else about Streetcar before I continue?
No,
it's a movie I want to keep talking about, but like,
yeah, right. It's almost like everything to say has been said, but there's also still so much more to be said. But like, the movie speaks for itself. It's great. I also just I mentioned earlier, but I just love the Tennessee Williams like style of just like these really like sweaty environments and it adds to the pressure of the themes as well. Just the idea that they're all almost like in a pressure cooker. I think the use of space. That's something we didn't really talk about. Is like it's a play adaptation, and sometimes play adaptations get very bogged down in just dialogue, two characters talking. But here it like really uses the space. It's like a tiny space, and that's part of the character.
Yeah.
Blanche is coming from this life of luxury, coming into this small, cramped little space where she thinks her sister's well off, but really she's with a bum. She can't afford it, and it's like a kind of messy little quaint little apartment. Like you pull a curtain and now you're in another room. Like I really like though how they really use the space and really make it feel sticky and sweaty and cramped and almost like a sardine can that you want to just like burst out of, because you are that character. You are in that space and you want out because you don't want to deal with what's going on.
Well said.
Yeah. Cool. Well, A Streetcar Named Desire, nominated for 12 Oscars, wins 4. So one of the wins is for art direction for that set that I just talked about.
Nice.
But the other 3 are 3 acting awards. It joins Network and Everything Ever All at Once as one of only 3 films to win 3 acting awards.
Wow.
It wins Best Actress for Vivien Leigh, Supporting Actor for Carl Malden, sorry, it's late. Supporting Actress for Kim Hunter, and then it is nominated for a plethora of other awards, including Picture, Director for Elia Kazan, Actor for Marlon Brando. He's the only one of the 4 who doesn't win, which is crazy in retrospect. Screenplay, Scoring, Dramatic or Comedy, Sound Recording, Cinematography, Black and White, and Costume Design, Black and White. So there we go.
That's wild. It's wild that the only thing it won was all the acting awards it won. That's crazy.
Yeah, it didn't win Screenplay or Director or Picture, but again, 3 acting wins. If you're watching that ceremony, you're like, it's going to win Best Picture. And then Place in the Sun wins Screenplay, Editing, and Director. And you're like, well, maybe that's going to win Best Picture. And then it's An American in Paris. But
although I feel like nowadays, isn't it more like, director and editing are more the telltale signs?
Right. And that's why I just said, like they probably thought it was Streetcar. But then once Place in the Sun won directing and editing and screenplay, then it was like, oh, now it's going to be that. And then all of a sudden American in Paris, which only got some text and a story win. But really quick, before we get into our ranking, should we get into our ranking and then talk about the upset? Because I feel like that would make more sense. Even though we've all kind of agreed that. Okay, let's get to the ranking first, just so we can have like a final button. Afterwards, we'll talk about whether or not we think the upset is upsetting to us, or if we think it's validated, and maybe why all of us, at the end of the day, why all of a sudden American Paris became the favorite and won. But Karly, you're our guest, so I'll let you kick it off with number 5. What is number 5 for you?
My number 5 is Decision Before Dawn.
Okay, I'm going to actually write this down because I don't have paper, because I don't have a desk that I'm usually using, so I have to prepare better next time and actually have that ready. All right, Decision Before Dawn. All right, Chad, what is your number 5?
I had this higher, actually, and then I moved it down. I put An American in Paris at 5.
All right, An American in Paris, the Best Picture winner at number 5. And I'm going to put Quo Vadis. So we're all different number 5s. Karly, what is going to be your number 4?
Quo Vadis.
All right, Chad, what is your number 4?
I had this at 5, and then I moved it up just thinking about it. Quo Vadis.
Okay. And my number 4 is An American in Paris. So there you go. Karly, what is your number 3?
An American in Paris.
All right. So we've all now officially said Quo Vadis and American in Paris. Chad, what is your number 3?
Decision Before Dawn.
That is also my number 3. So we have the same top 2. It's the same top 2 that everyone thought was going to win. So let's find out what we are going to give the win today. Karly, what is number 2 for you?
A Streetcar Named Desire.
Chad, what is your number 2?
A Place in the Sun.
And my number 2, oh God, I hate that it's on me, but I already wrote it down, is A Streetcar Named Desire. So, Karly, what is your number 1?
A Place in the Sun.
Chad, your number 1?
A Streetcar Named Desire.
And my number 1 is also A Place in the Sun, which means for Chad and I, it would have been a coin flip. So, Karly, because you're our guest, you break that tie. Yeah. It's going to be A Place in the Sun as our Best Picture winner. Chad, I know this wasn't your favorite, but are you okay with this result?
Yeah, I mean, it's just weird for me because I actually had A Place in the Sun at 3 coming into this, and then I moved it up to 2. So I'm not disappointed. It's kind of like the same thing when we go back to 12 Angry Men not being our winner, where I'm like, that's easily the one, and then no. It wasn't. It apparently wasn't. And then here, it's like the same thing where I actually didn't know what to think about coming into this. I didn't know what you guys loved, and then just thinking about it, I was like, Streetcar Named Desire was the best one of the batch. And then like to see both of you guys slightly disagree with that, I'm like, wow, okay. But that also makes me want to rewatch A Place in the Sun again, because I did think it was a really interesting film.
Yeah. It's very close for me. So like, I'm not like, it's a clear number 1 or 2, but I just think also something about the surprise of it. Where Streetcar, I'm like, all right, it's based on a play, but also like A Place in the Sun's based on a book. So like, they're both just great adaptations. Like, it is very clearly my 1 and 2 though. Like, it was like those 2, and then Decision Before Dawn, and then the bottom 2 for me. But Karly, what do you think of our result here? I mean, it's obviously your number 1.
Yeah.
Film,
I thought it was mainly the conversation that helped me figure out A Place in the Sun was my number 1, just because we had so much. Both of those 2, we just had so much to talk about, and there's like so many layers and so much complexity. But at the end of the day, I liked A Place in the Sun more. I thought like the story felt a bit stronger to me, but Streetcar, the characters were stronger. So it was really tough having to, like, those are obviously like the top 2, which makes sense. The Academy thought so at first, and then they changed their minds, I guess.
Yeah, according to like most of the sites, it seems like A Place in the Sun was like the front runner, Streetcar 2, American Paris 3. But according to us, Decision Before Dawn was our common 3, actually, looking at the math. But either way, I mean, like, we had a very interesting ranking, and I'm very happy. But what do you guys think of the upset? Do you think, ultimately, I mean, we all agree American Paris should not have won over those other 2. But now, having talked about it, do we have any theories as to why? Or is it just, it's the happy musical, and all these other films are very dour and sad, or big and broad, and sometimes they just wanted to laugh and sing, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
That has to be
that. But it's not. So I would say it's an upset, but it's not an upset I feel super strongly about. Like, I don't feel like the other 2 were robbed, really. It's just like, no, I think the other 2 were better, but wanting to go with the happy, fun musical, like especially at least in our times, like, I completely understand that. Like, I completely understand wanting to go with the more positive, hopeful thing. And I'm not sure exactly what the sentiment was in this specific time. Like, if they were looking for something more positive.
Chad, any last thoughts on this upset?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it has to be that, like, the Academy at the time just didn't like the more dour films, where I feel like those are infinitely the more interesting films. But then again, that's from like my modern 2025 lens of just like thinking about like, American in Paris, like, I feel like I've seen that. It's just like a love story. It's not even really that like romantic, I guess. And it's just, it's a lot of fun singing and dancing, has a Hollywood ending. So I guess I get it on some level, but also like I have also seen A Streetcar Named Desire. And for me, that's kind of like up there now as like one of my favorite. So
it's really cool to like go through like some of these American classics, like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Streetcar, like all these films that are like these real like American staples, because they're great, and I'm glad we got to talk about them. And Place in the Sun, I think also another thing is like I'd never heard of it, and
such a surprise.
Yeah. So it was a real delight, but ultimately pretty good slate. Like I was honestly more in favor of this than I thought it'd be. And even with another watch, I might put Quo Vadis higher than American in Paris, but it was a little too long. But we have to get into our acting awards. So maybe some of these films, even the ones that didn't win, I'm honestly certain that at least one of them that didn't get our main prize will at least have something represented here. But Karly, you decided to go actor first. So you are going to tell us first and foremost, who would you want for your best actor prize?
Yeah, so we just talked about him for a while. So when I watched this movie, I was just like, yeah, I'm going first for actor, because like there's no female performance that like feels this elevated to me. So I'm going with Marlon Brando. And I don't have much to say. We talked about his performance and career pretty handily. I do think it's wild. This was his second role ever, because it's such an impressive performance. But like you said, he was kind of cheating because he'd done it on Broadway. So it's always very lived in. But yeah, he just kills it. Like like in a movie with like 2 killer female actresses, like he just steals the show for me.
And I honestly didn't think about this when we were talking earlier, but like the method acting is probably how you make it feel lived in, because otherwise, like, you do a role for so long on Broadway, when you like if you were to do it in a film, like, yeah, you're gonna do great, but like it almost could feel a little redundant, a little boring. Like, all right, I've done this for so long, but I feel like when you are the character, it's like easier to just like be in the moment and be present, I guess. Which is why it's such a good performance. But Chad, what is your best actor choice? And you can also talk about Marlon before.
Yeah. I mean, I've already discussed him a lot, but funny enough, he was going to be my number 2. Had Karly picked my number 1. But my number 1 is Peter Ustinov as Nero. I'm sorry, Dylan. I feel like this is draft day, and but no, if it's any comfort at all, when I watched Quo Vadis, the only thing that I was thinking was I have to get Peter Ustinov because this dude is just that guy, and I'm just like, just the way he's just being so oafish and just like full of himself, but also like like I think Karly like put it perfectly too. Just like you feel like he's that guy of people would kind of like support him, like believe him because he believes his own bullshit, kind of a deal, and kind of like the Trump figure of back then, kind of a deal, like just lying and just like doing all this stuff with ease, and just because he's that idiot, kind of a deal, but he's got so much power as an idiot that people follow him because they're scared of him and stuff like that. And I don't know, I just never thought Nero was like that, and then seeing him like that played by Peter Ustinov brilliantly, I was just like, it makes so much sense about how, like, everything, even in our politics today, makes so much sense now, even though it's terrible.
Yeah, I think next to Brando, he's the best of this slate. I agree. I'm happy you took him because like he needs to be here. I really wish I could have, but that's how the cookie crumbles, cookie wise, I guess.
Yeah, his performance was so good. He almost made me rethink picking Marlon Brando because I was just like, God, because Quo Vadis was the last one I watched, and then watching it, I was like, not God, maybe I need to pick Nero, but
right.
You know what? I feel like some people would say it's like too much, but I feel like for that movie that is so like dense and heavy and epic, it's like it's nice to have that lighter, just kind of. He almost feels like he should be like the supporting jester, and he is a supporting actor. He's nominated for supporting, but he feels like the central, like the glue. Like he's the entryway. He's the thing that everyone could agree is fabulous about the film. So I'm glad you picked it. It's a great pick. All right. I think I have an easy choice here. I was between Peter Ustinov and then if someone picked it, which you did, I had this guy as my backup, and I feel really good about it. For my favorite movie, it's going to be Montgomery Clift. I just think playing, it's obviously the method acting is very interesting, but I just think playing this guy who's like smarmy and Weasley, but also being Montgomery Clift, who's normally not that, it was a really cool like kind of change of pace for him, but also just like I really like how he still has that empathy in what we were talking about with Streetcar too. Just like you understand why he's doing it. You don't agree with it, but you at least understand, like in his eyes, especially this immature guy, where his priorities lie and that kind of false like view of romance and relationships, and like he makes all the wrong moves, but it's fascinating to watch him do it. So and you have to be charmed by him early on because it needs to be a switch. It needs to, this whole movie, if from the very start it's like, oh, this is a killer, like if you like when you're watching the Ted Bundy movie with Zac Efron, it's like who he is from the start, so it's a little less interesting. Here it's like it catches you off guard as it catches her off guard, as you're starting to like, oh my gosh, is this where it's going? And I think a lot of that is his performance. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah, it's like all the casting that they did in Promising Young Woman, casting a bunch of comedians and likable actors to be the pieces of shit on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. Any thoughts on Montgomery Clift, Karly? Or
good, cool. Good third choice.
Listen, I think this is a strong 3. Like I feel like sometimes with the guest episodes, it's like our third pick is like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, but I'm actually really happy. I think this is a good 3. But for me, in a similar way that like I don't know if it was Karly what you said about Brando or I think it was what you said about Brando, where it's like you need an actor because for you like it's like it rose above the rest, just as like the actresses, like there was not one that rose above. For me there was, and I think Vivien Leigh in Streetcar is like one of the best performances I've ever seen. Like she's just so good at being so controversial and complicated while also still having that heart that you feel for her. and it's an impossible task for an actor. And Blanche is, I think, the hardest role to play in any play, let alone a film where you are Vivien Leigh. You have this expectation. You're Gone with the Wind, you know. It's fascinating, and I think everything she does, her physicality, her vocal speech, her relationships, her chemistry, the outbursts, the quiet moments, are all perfect. So I'm very happy to have Vivien Leigh here, and she didn't win for Gone with the Wind, so it's cool to kind of finally give her a win for a performance I think we all agree is slightly better, even though Gone with the Wind is heralded as one of the greatest performances of all time. But we picked Judy Garland and Greta Garbo because we're cool. Any thoughts on Vivien Leigh, guys?
Yeah, Vivien Leigh was my number one. So that was easily like my favorite performance of any of these movies. When she floored me. She took me on like so many different journeys with her character, and I just like was like fascinated. She's on the same level as it was Elizabeth Taylor in Virginia Woolf, right? Like on that level.
I agree.
Like, where I was like, holy shit.
I thought of her.
Lady.
Yeah.
And stuff. But yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Karly, any thoughts?
Yeah, I liked what you said about how it's such a hard role. Like you could so easily fall into stereotype or overacting. But she kills it.
Yeah. All right, Chad, who is going to be your pick for Best Actress?
Yeah. So in a way, I stole yours. You stole mine. So then I'll
we could trade if you. No, I'm kidding. I don't know.
No, that's okay. But I would actually. But that being said, I went with Kim Hunter from Streetcar, because I think she like I said, you know, she's Stella. She kind of feels like a main character too in a way, even though she is also feels like a supporting. But it's like one of those where, you know, she is, because she's like, she doesn't really affect that much, but she's affected by like all of this stuff around her. But she's also one that goes through a pretty significant change, because, you know, you can't, like most people, I feel like would, you know, kind of just, you know, fall into the, oh, my sister's crazy. What is she talking about? You know, kind of a deal. And then would just fall into the same old, you know, just fall into the same old, like, but I love him, you know, kind of a deal. And, you know, I don't think he would do that, you know, and just, you know, stay with him because of the baby. But she makes the stronger choice of like, I just had a baby and I'm leaving like my support system there, but it's a shitty support system. So it's like, I don't know, it's a whole thing, but it's I feel like she just is that victim throughout that ends up changing for the better at the end, which I just really loved. I just thought she was a great presence throughout.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think it's, I don't know if even it's a right number 2 pick, because there's still so many great ones out there. I mean, this is a really stacked cast lineup for male and female. Like it's really stacked. But yeah, I do think this is a fantastic performance. And like she needs to be that rock, because Marlon Brando and Vivien Leigh are like doing so much that she needs to kind of be the glue. Even though I said that about Peter Ustinov in the opposite way, where he needs to be the thing that pops, she needs to be the thing that kind of keeps it grounded. So Karly, any thoughts on her? And then you can transition to your pick.
Yeah, she just kills it. Like it's so easy to like criticize women for not leaving abusive partners, because it's like, oh, he's horrible to you, why don't you leave? And she really shows that like why it's so hard to leave. Like you understand her perspective so well, and like she just plays it so well. And like I think it's very fitting that those big 3 performances in Streetcar were all picked by us. Like that makes all the sense in the world.
So we picked a different 3 than the Academy, but we still picked 3. So it's destined to win 3 acting prizes regardless. And shout out to Karl Malden. He's great, but just he is a supporting role, whereas the other 3.
He's so good too.
I mean, you could argue Kim Hunter could also be lead, but I'm glad they campaigned her in supporting so they could both get Oscars. I mean, I think that's pretty smart. But all right, Karly, who's it going to be?
Okay, I am picking Elizabeth Taylor from The Sun. Because I was thinking, I was torn between her or like, you know, the actress, the one who plays Alice in A Place in the Sun.
Shelley Winters, I think.
Yeah,
who was the older woman in Poseidon Adventure? Really cool.
So yeah, I was torn between those 2, and I was like writing up notes, and I was like, I just felt stronger about Elizabeth Taylor. I mean, she's Elizabeth Taylor, of course. It's such a supporting role, but I feel like the movie is so much less effective if you don't like her, if you don't like her character, if you don't buy that romance, then it's so much easier for the movie to just not be nearly as effective. Like she could easily be bitchy and like, you know, they easily could have shown her in a different light, but like she just sells that genuineness and like has that chemistry with him, and like it works so well. I love her in this. She's just fantastic.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I personally think Shelley Winters would probably be my pick of the two, but like I didn't even think about a backup because I knew I was taking Vivian Leigh. But like, yeah, I think that performance is so good. Yeah, she needs to be likable because she could easily just be the other woman and like have no personality whatsoever and be this like plot catalyst, but she's not. She has a personality. She has a voice in this thing, which is something that is not said about a lot of movies like this. Even in Sunrise, she's a driving force of that plot, but like I don't even think she has a name in that movie. I think she's the other woman or the evil woman, or like that's her credited name, I think. So it's cool that she has a distinct personality here. Chad, any thoughts on Elizabeth Taylor, who now gets her third prize here? She got one for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and for Virginia Woolf. So this is her third.
I'm probably more like on your wavelength where I'm like slightly more Shelley Winters, but it's just because of that scene in the boat. But Karly's not wrong. That, I mean, she is Elizabeth Taylor, right? Like, and she, you know, really sells everything you guys are saying. So yeah, this is also a great choice for sure.
Yeah. I feel like if you were to hold up our 6 acting winners, it's like some of these are like the greatest actors of all time. Right, like if you just ask any poll, like Family Feud, like these are your answers. It's like Marlon Brando, Vivian Leigh, Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery Clift, Peter Ustinov, Kim Hunter. I'm like, oh my gosh, like add Humphrey Bogart and you got an Ingrid Bergman, and there you go. Like that's like the classic heavy hitters. But all right, time to recap as my voice is shooting out for the night. But our best actors, my best actor Montgomery Clift for Place in the Sun, Chad's best actor is Peter Ustinov for Quo Vadis, and Karly's best actor is Marlon Brando for Streetcar Named Desire. My best actress is Vivian Leigh for Streetcar Named Desire. Chad's best actress is Kim Hunter for Streetcar Named Desire. Karly's best actress is Elizabeth Taylor for Place in the Sun, and our best film, our best picture is A Place in the Sun, which means A Place in the Sun and Streetcar both getting 3 awards apiece, which is really cool. So it is a spiritual tie in a way. But yeah, very good slate. I'm really happy with the way this went. All technical difficulties on my end aside, I will get it fixed for next time. But thank you all for bearing with me in my new place. But there it is. Last thoughts on 51. Karly, as a 2-time guest, how you feeling? This, I think, is a better slate than the last one you got to be a part of.
Oh yeah, definitely better. Because there's only one that I didn't really like, and the rest, like I liked various amounts, and like the top 2 were just so strong that
Nice. Chad, any last thoughts on the slate before we tease the next one?
I definitely think the slate was good. I think that lot more films were more interesting than I thought they might be. Even Quo Vadis, which I was like, probably going to sleep through that thing, and I found a lot of it to be actually fascinating.
Yeah.
But I did also want to say, Karly, great guest.
Yes.
She always comes in here and just feels like she's always been here. Mm-hmm. And so I love when Karly comes, and I'd love to see her again, because I always pick like really interesting slates too. So
yeah, and I love how prepared she is. Like she's watching these movies months before we are, and I'm like, you go girl. I'm the one who needs to be watching these in advance because I'm getting on a boat in a few months. But yeah, no, it's great, and we love having you on. And maybe next time we'll pick a slate that doesn't have Vigente Minnelli there. Like I don't think he got nominated for anything else. Like I don't think Meet Me in St. Louis got anything. I will say though. George Stevens, Place in the Sun director, this is the first of like a trilogy of like a thematic trilogy in the way that like Pablo Larraín's Spencer, Jackie, Maria trilogy is. So it's this, Shane, which is 1952, I believe, or 1950 something. Yes, and then the third one is Giant, which also stars Ingrid Bergman.
That's James Dean too, right?
Yes, James Dean. So Chad and I will actually be covering at least Giant sometime in this year. And then Shane, I don't think we have scheduled this year, but maybe next year, if Karly, you want to do the Shane year so we can talk about him maybe. I don't know. We'll find a great slate for you. But Giant we will be covering. I mean, we don't have to see them in order, so it'll be fine. But we are going to be covering Giant, which is a giant movie. It's like 4 hours long. But It's going to be great. I'm excited. But next month, we actually have, we're continuing the year of the upset, obviously. We all actually decided, we forgot to say it, but like, are we upset by this upset? Yes, a little bit.
Yeah.
But yes, I am. Chad is. Karly's a little bit. But is this an upset? Yes. Are we upset? Yes. I don't know. Anyway, it's a fun way to cap it. But next month we're doing another upset. And what's fun about this upset is it's another year where like an underdog movie beat two movies that were like kind of at the top. One that was like one was a director, adapted screenplay, whatever, and then the other one was like a big acting player, but then a film ended up getting best director and best picture, coming out of the from behind, an underdog story about a real underdog, and that is Rocky. Because we are talking about 1976. It actually works out perfectly that the year of the upsets has Rocky as part of it. But yeah, people did not expect Rocky to win against some of these other films, and when I rattle off what those other films are, you'll understand why. But this is the slate for 1976. All the President's Men, Bound for Glory, Network, Rocky, and Taxi Driver.
Right.
So,
Wild.
My God.
and oddly enough, Taxi Driver only nominated for 4 Oscars and didn't win any that year. So like that just goes to show how time has changed things. But Taxi Driver would be like the public's upset of like nowadays we look at that as like the upset of like how did that not win? But Network is another film like Streetcar that wins 3 acting awards, so people thought that has to win, right? And it wins original screenplay. And then All the President's Men wins that 4th acting award and wins adapted screenplay. So everyone in the night was thinking it's either All the President's Men or Network, and then who won director and picture? Boom, Rocky. So we are going to talk about it. Did Rocky deserve it? We'll find out. And we're going to be joined by another guest. It's going to be our last guest for a little while. It is going to be Dan Skip Allen. He's going to be back after about a year. His last episode was last January. It's been 14 months. So we're going to have Dan back on to talk about Rocky, All the President's Men, Bound for Glory, Network, and Taxi Driver. But my voice is almost entirely shot. Any last thoughts about that? Karly, you're not going to be on that slate, but any thoughts on that slate?
Something must have been in the water that year with the artists. Like, those are 4 iconic movies. That's crazy.
Yeah. Chad, any thoughts, preemptive thoughts?
Yeah, iconic, but also like I feel like it's going to be a very well-known slate between the 3 of us, where it's just like we've seen a lot of those. Yeah. So I'm just.
I think I've seen all but one, or no, all but 2. I haven't seen.
Is probably the one you haven't seen.
I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen All the President's Men actually. But
okay. Yeah. So I mean, that it's just going to be a really, really interesting one to revisit all of them, and then discuss them. And I know Dan's going to have some thoughts because I think one of them is one of his favorite movies ever. So
yeah, and it's funny because I don't even know which one of those it is, because I could see Rocky, Taxi Driver, Network, or All the President's Men being that for him. I don't know about Bound for Glory
actually, but I know one I think is one of his favorites.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see. Even now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, the last time we had a De Niro, Scorsese was his favorite, but also I could see him liking Network, but also I don't know. We'll figure it out. But Rocky, it's a sports movie, and I know Dan loves sports, so either way, I'm very excited to see what he thinks, and I'm excited to see what you think.
That ranking is going to be so hard.
Oh, yeah.
I'm dreading it already, and I haven't even seen all the movies, but also a complete unknown, Woody Guthrie. So, like, I mean, I'm excited for Bound for Glory, so maybe that's going to be a surprise sneaker. I think that's the 5th one that no one really talks about nowadays. But
Witness for the prosecution.
Yeah, well, hey, look what happened with that. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode. My voice is going, so I won't plug what I've got going on. It's just here on the channel. The podcast is going to be more readily bumping in April. We're going to really commit to it. This is actually coming out in April, so it's already been bumping, hopefully. So I got to remember these are all coming out later because we're recording a bunch of episodes for you guys, so we're gonna hopefully get some episodes so we can last the rest of the year, and then if we get on the boat and things change, then we'll keep you updated. But for now, we have at least up till July. We're set, we're scheduled, we're ready. Sorry, my voice is going. Anything else, Chad? Close us out.
Thanks for watching. This was fun.
Karly, any plugs? Anything else?
You'll see me on the Traders on this channel this summer.
Oh, yeah.
Great. I'm so excited for that, to finally see it in full. And I also did a great video with friend of the channel, Matt, on his channel, Matty Loves Movies, where we talked about messy sapphics. And that was a ton of fun. So please go look for that.
Absolutely. Well, we will see you next month for 1976. It's going to be a barn burner. Get settled in. Get ready. If you thought this one was tough, Just you wait. So thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
Oh dear. The winner is An American in Paris.